Chapter 680. Ma Chichi waited a full 2 to 3 days after sending the message before Yin Shixiang called back. Chichi, it's Yin Shixiang. I just finished a meeting and want to come to your school to talk to you. Yin Shixiang wore a Bluetooth headset as he spoke seriously. It was already 10 p.m., and Ma Chichi had just returned from studying at the library. As soon as she heard it was Yin Shixiang calling again, she quickly said, "Brother Xiong, I'm at the dorm. I'll come down and wait for you." Ma Chichi was just about to shower, but there was no need for that now. She quickly grabbed her phone and keys and went downstairs. She waited outside the dormitory for 10 minutes before she saw a black Jeep with a military plate drive over and stop in front of her. Yin Shixiang opened the door. "Get in." Ma Chichi nodded and got in without another word. She had been anxious about Gunyanji for a few days, and now that Yin Shixiang had finally arrived, she was completely focused on saving Gunyanji. She didn't hear someone calling her name from behind her. "Chichi, Chichi, come down. Chichi, Chichi, where are you going?" The senior who came looking for Ma Chichi with a bag of midnight snacks saw Ma Chichi get into a military jeep. In a daze, he saw a very handsome man in the car. He quickly called for Ma Chichi to come down, but she didn't seem to hear him and got into the car. Senior brother's mouth twitched as he took out his phone to call Ma Chichi. Ma Chichi was about to speak to Yin Shixiang in the car when she heard her phone ring. She looked down to see it was senior brother. She wasn't in the mood to flirt with senior brother, so she didn't pick up. She didn't expect senior brother to be so persistent and keep calling her. Ma Chichi had no choice but to answer the phone and ask, "Senior brother, what's up?" Senior brother took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. He smiled and asked deliberately, "Chichi? Are you at the dorm? I bought you supper. Come down and get it." Ma Chichi frowned. "I'm already asleep. Thank you for the supper, senior brother. I'll treat you tomorrow." She then hung up. Senior brother stood in front of the B University female graduate student dormitory for a full minute before he finally put down his arm. He turned around and glared angrily in the direction of Ma Chichi's dorm before quickly walking down the stairs of the dorm. He threw the supper in his hand into the trash can, dusted his hands and strode off. Yin Shixiang drove Ma Chichi all the way to B University's parking lot before stopping the car. It was already late at night. The parking lot here was reserved for faculty and students during the day, so there were only a few cars left. The empty parking lot was perfect for talking, and they didn't have to worry about being eavesdropped. Yin Shixiang turned to look at Ma Chichi and said sternly, "Chichi, tell me again. What video?" Ma Chichi didn't say much. She took out her phone and unlocked it. She logged into her instant messaging account and clicked on the video Gunyanji had sent her. "See for yourself." Yin Shixiang stared at her phone. On the 5.5-inch phone screen, there was a young woman with half of her face bruised and swollen. Her eyes were nervous and panicked, and her soft voice was filled with panic. "Chichi, Chichi, I'm in Berlin. Save me." The video was very short. It was only a few seconds, so it was obviously sent in a hurry. This was Gunyanji? Was this the little girl who grew up under their meticulous care? Half of her face was swollen because her skin was fairer than the average person's. Now that she was injured, the bruises on her face looked much scarier and worse than the average person's. What made him feel even worse was the look in her eyes. In that instant, he seemed to see the 12-year-old Gunyanji again. The little girl who would hug her head in fear when someone spoke a little too loudly. She would curl up in a corner and cry silently. Yin Shixiang turned his head abruptly to look at the dark night outside the car window. He clenched his hand into a fist and covered his mouth to stop the sob that almost escaped his throat. However, he couldn't stop the tears from flowing out of the corners of his eyes. He could only pretend not to care and turn his head to the side, using his left hand to wipe away the tears. The video was too short, so Ma Chichi thought Yin Shixiang didn't understand it. Seeing him turn his head to look out the window, she played it for him again. "Brother Xiong, look. Is that Nyenji?" Yin Shixiang closed his eyes and took out his phone. He said to Ma Chichi, "Forward the video to me." Ma Chichi glanced at him. "Brother Xiong, your account?" Yin Shixiang thought about it. They didn't allow him to install the instant messaging software on the market. Their instant messaging software was made by themselves and had a dedicated line for communication. It was much more secure than the software used by ordinary people. "How about this? Add my phone number, then save the video locally and send it to me via text." Yin Shixiang gave Ma Chichi his phone number. Although Yin Shixiang had just called Ma Chichi's cell phone, his cell phone had a special setting that could hide his cell phone number. Even though he had called, Ma Chichi couldn't see all of his cell phone numbers, so naturally she couldn't save his cell phone number. In order to add his phone number, Yin Shixiang had to tell her the complete phone number. Ma Qiqi glanced at him and slowly saved his phone number in her phone's address book. Then she followed Yin Shixiang's instructions and sent the video to him. Yin Shixiang received Gu Nianji's distress video and played it again. After confirming there were no problems, he saved it locally. Thank you, Qiqi. If it weren't for you, we really wouldn't have known the situation was so serious. Yin Shixiang thanked Ma Qiqi sincerely. Ma Qiqi quickly waved her hands and shook her head. Brother Xiong, don't say that. Nianji is my roommate and also my good friend. Who else would I help if not her when something like this happened to her? Thank you, Qiqi. It's Nianji's luck to have a good friend like you. Yin Shixiang smiled. He thought about how his Nianji had a lot of good friends. Her 3 undergrad roommates were very protective of her. Now that she had such a good roommate for her postgrad studies, it was obvious that their decision to let her study was the right choice. Brother Xiong, you're too kind. Ma Qiqi sighed. Actually, I didn't do much. I just made a few calls and sent a few texts. Sighing, Nianji went out with Professor He. I didn't think something would happen to her. I asked Professor He and he confirmed. He Jichu? What did he say? Ma Qiqi thought about it and said, Professor He confirmed that Nianji is indeed missing. He also said he's looking for her. As she spoke, Ma Qiqi showed Yin Shixiang He Jichu's German social media account, waiting for you to come home. Yin Shixiang finally remembered that He Jichu was also in Germany. He was the one who took Nianji to Germany. How could something happen to Nianji with He Jichu there? Yin Shixiang's back broke out in a cold sweat. No one knew He Jichu's capabilities and influence abroad better than Yin Shixiang and the others. He and Zhao Liangzi had both personally witnessed He Jichu's influence abroad. Who could be so powerful to lose Nianji with such a powerful force? Yin Shixiang's hands on the steering wheel began to tremble slightly. He tried his best to calm himself down and said calmly to Ma Qiqi, Okay, I got it. It's getting late. I'll take you back. As he spoke, he started the car. Ma Qiqi finally got the message through and sighed in relief. She leaned back in the seat and smiled. Brother Xiong, Nianji's boyfriend is with you, right? Yeah. Yin Shixiang answered absent-mindedly. He kept thinking about how to inform Huo Xiao, but when he thought about the deputy chief's words, he didn't dare disobey his superior's orders. Then you'll let him know, right? Ma Qiqi didn't give up and asked again. She felt like she was really worried about Nianji's safety. If she didn't tell Nianji's awesome boyfriend, Ma Qiqi would feel like she hadn't done her best. Yin Shixiang didn't know how to answer. The hierarchy in the military, the difference in administrative power, and the unconditional obedience of soldiers to their superiors, all of these things Ma Qiqi couldn't understand at the moment were swirling in Yin Shixiang's mind. Turning his head, Yin Shixiang saw Ma Qiqi's big, hopeful eyes and said slowly, You mean Huo Xiao? He's on a business trip, so I can't contact him for now. It was the 3rd update and today was Monday. I'd forgotten about the recommendation tickets. The 4th update should be around 9 o'clock at night. Come on, don't be careless and vote for the guaranteed monthly ticket. P.S. When the 2nd update was posted for the first time this afternoon, I realized it was posted incorrectly. I posted the chapter before I edited it, but later I realized the word count was wrong. I've already edited it. It's more than 100 words more than the first one. If you find the plot is not coherent, go download the chapter from this afternoon again. P.S. If the monthly ticket reaches 1200 by 12 noon tomorrow, continue with the 3rd update. Chapter 681. Business trip? Then call? Or text or video call? How could he not be notified? Ma Qiqi's eyes widened in disbelief. Brother Xiong, it's the age of the internet now. How could he not be notified? Don't tell me he went to some godforsaken place for a business trip. Yin Shixiang grimaced as he raked his hair and decided not to explain. You don't understand. Okay, we've arrived at your dorm. The female graduate student's dorm was right in front of them. Yin Shixiang stopped the car. Ma Qiqi really didn't understand, but she knew Huo Xiao and Yin Shixiang were soldiers. Perhaps they really had their own difficulties, so she didn't press him further and hopped out of the car. Then Brother Xiong, you have to help Nianji and bring her back as soon as possible. Yin Shixiang nodded. Don't worry, Qiqi. We'll do our best. He immediately started the car and left. Ma Qiqi stood on the steps in front of the dorm and watched Yin Shixiang's jeep disappear before returning to her dorm. Yin Shixiang sped the entire way as the video he had just seen kept replaying in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. No, he really had to tell Huo Xiao about this. Yin Shixiang thought about it and finally made up his mind. He turned the steering wheel and drove to the military headquarters. It was almost midnight and most of the people in the military headquarters were asleep. Yin Shixiang drove all the way to General Ji's house. He got out of the car and said to the guard at the door, "Please help me ask General Ji that Yin Shixiang is back and has something important to ask him." The guard glanced at him and picked up the intercom to call General Ji's personal secretary. He confirmed that General Ji was still awake before taking the call. "Chief, there's a lieutenant colonel calling himself Yin Shixiang at the door. He says he has something important to ask you." General Ji took off his reading glasses in the study, rubbed his eyes and said, "Then let him in." Yin Shixiang was led into the study by General Ji's personal secretary. "Hello, Chief. You're here. Sit." General Ji nodded and pointed at the soft stool in front of his desk. Yin Shixiang sat upright and said sternly, "General Ji, I was just called back from abroad by the Deputy General to understand the situation. There are some things I want to confirm with General Ji." General Ji glanced at his personal secretary. The man understood and turned to leave. He even thoughtfully closed the door of the study. "Speak, what is it?" General Ji put on his reading glasses and looked at the documents in front of him again. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk more. Yin Shixiang saw General Ji's attitude and knew it wouldn't be easy to convince him. However, when he thought of Gu Nianji and Major General Hua, he braced himself and said, "General Ji, this matter is of great importance. Not only did something happen to our field personnel, but Gu Nianji also." General Ji looked up from the documents and expressionlessly rolled his eyelids over the top of his reading glasses. The corners of Yin Shixiang's mouth twitched, but he still gathered his courage and continued. "Such a big thing happened, but the deputy chief said that we can't inform Hua Xiao. I just want to confirm if I really can't inform Hua Xiao." "Yes, you can't." "I said it," General Ji said coldly. "Since you know, I'm warning you. If you dare to tell Xiaoheng about this before he returns, I won't be merciful. The military court is prepared for people like you who pretend to obey orders but secretly oppose them." Yin Shixiang's heart skipped a beat. He didn't understand why General Ji would use such a serious term, pretend to obey? He almost said they disobeyed military orders. "General Ji, I don't understand. We've never done anything like pretend to obey." Yin Shixiang didn't admit it. He stubbornly argued with General Ji. "Haha, never?" General Ji threw the documents aside and leaned back in his chair. "You can say you've never done it, but can you guarantee that others have never done it?" Yin Shixiang was speechless. Fine, he couldn't guarantee for others, but he trusted Hua Xiao. He believed that he wouldn't do anything to betray the country or the military. "General Ji, shut up." General Ji suddenly became angry. He stood up from behind the desk and pointed at Yin Shixiang's nose. "You said you didn't? Then let me ask you. Did you know that Gu Nianji isn't Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter?" Yin Shixiang's eyes widened in shock. "What? Not his biological daughter? This. Where did you hear this?" Even Yin Shixiang didn't know. He was Hua Xiaoheng's personal secretary. He really kept it a secret. General Ji snorted inwardly. "Big Xiong, you're incompetent. How can you not know something even your boss knows? TSK. Think carefully about what's going on before you argue with me about whether or not to inform Xiaoheng." General Ji waved his hand. "Let's go. It's late. I need to rest." Yin Shixiang walked out of General Ji's house like he was sleepwalking. He also got into his car like he was sleepwalking. Then he started the car in a daze. Even in such a state of mind, he drove all the way back to the Special Operations Forces headquarters without any accidents. Back at the headquarters, he subconsciously went to the conference room. Seeing that it was full of people, he finally came to his senses and nodded to everyone. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Everyone in the conference room expressed that it was fine and waited for him to speak. Yin Shixiang took the mineral water on the table and opened the cap to drink half a bottle. Then he said to everyone in the conference room, "I went to see the deputy chief and then General Ji. That's why I was delayed." Everyone expressed their understanding and didn't seem to be full of resentment. Yin Shixiang nodded and said, "First, deal with the disappearance of the 2 field agents. I'm giving you the authority to send people to understand the entire situation. I want to see the whole truth before 10 tomorrow morning." This included the decision-making process, the selection of field agents, the confirmation of field coordinates, and finally the final contact between the 2 field agents and them. "Roger, Chief." Yin Shixiang's subordinates accepted the task and immediately left the conference room to begin preparations. Yin Shixiang sat alone in the conference room and covered his face with his hands. He sat there silently for a while until he was truly exhausted, so he returned to his room to rest. Gu Nianji had already been recuperating at the blonde, blue-eyed owner's place for 2 days. For the past 2 days she had changed the dressing and bandages on the wound on her arm all by herself. Fortunately, it was her left arm that was injured, so it wasn't difficult to bandage it. Actually, her wound healed the next day, but in order to not let these people know about her strange constitution, Gu Nianji continued to pretend to change the dressing and bandage. She hung her left arm around her neck and pretended to be seriously ill. However, she felt that it was too boring to recuperate alone, so she borrowed the owner's laptop and planned to surf the internet to kill time. The lady boss generously lent her laptop to her. For the past 2 days, Gu Nianji spent most of her time on the laptop. She had nothing to do, so she often searched for things related to Li Haiqing's case. She didn't know how many news reports and case analyses she had read, but there was nothing new to read. She continued searching, wanting to see old news. As she searched old news, Gu Nianji suddenly discovered a strange phenomenon. She realized that the search engine here didn't seem to be able to find all the relevant news. For example, when she searched for old news about Li Haiqing's case, she originally wanted to collect all the news reports from the time of the case until now, then compile them into a book based on the timeline. She wanted to see if there was any internal connection between the news and the progress of the case. As a result, Gu Nianji clearly discovered that more than half of the news she had clearly seen before was now gone. Because she had an outstanding memory, she could remember everything she read once. And the news about Li Haiqing's case was related to her lawsuit, so she had seen almost every single one. Now that she searched, she realized that the news she had seen before was gone. Was it because the news had already been deleted? That was impossible, because all the other news on the same website were still there at the same time, so why was only a portion of the news gone? What was so special about the news that had disappeared? Gu Nianji closed her eyes and leaned against the bed, thinking silently for a while. Although the news had disappeared from the internet, she still remembered it, and it slid through her mind one by one. Carefully recalling the content of the news, Gu Nianji suddenly opened her eyes. She discovered a pattern. The news that had clearly existed before but had now disappeared from the search all had one thing in common. That was, these news all had the name Lawyer He, or Hijichu. This was the 4th update, and it was sent to Raindrop 6868, who had been promoted to the position of leader. Today was Monday and he had forgotten about the recommendation tickets. Come, don't be careless and vote for the minimum monthly ticket. P.S. If the monthly ticket reaches 1200 before noon tomorrow, continue with the 3rd update. Oh, __. Oh. Chapter 682. This is interesting. Gu Nianji muttered to herself. She leaned against the bed with her left arm hanging from her neck. She only used her right hand to type and looked very clumsy. The blonde bar owner and bartender often came in to see her. They saw her typing on the laptop with one hand and thought it was very interesting. They wanted to persuade her to stop typing and just watch a movie, but Gu Nianji smiled and said, "I'll watch it later. I'm browsing the forums right now to see people fighting." Since she said that, the bar owner and bartender stopped trying to persuade her. After they left, Gu Nianji thought about the pattern she had just discovered. What kind of network could cause some news to appear and others to not appear? This problem was too easy for Gu Nianji to solve. Blocked. Someone had set up a keyword block on the computer network she had logged into. Therefore, all the websites with blocked keywords were filtered. This method was actually very simple after thinking about it. It was similar to the plugins that everyone used to filter ads and the ad block software that filtered certain websites. It was almost the same principle. Was it like this? Gu Nianji felt that she should still give it a try. Make bold assumptions and be careful in verifying them. This kind of network block might be an insurmountable chasm for others, but not for people like Gu Nianji. She had systematically learned about hacking from Zhao Liangzi, the top 5 hackers on the entire Blue Planet at the Special Operations Forces base. Zhao Liangzi had laid a very solid foundation for her because he had taught her from the most basic DOS program, which was the ancestor of the widely used Windows operating system. To be a truly skilled hacker, one didn't just know how to use hacking software. Truly skilled hackers were all software engineers who were very good at programming. In their eyes, the entire network seemed to be like the flashing green numbers and lines in the Matrix. It had its own logic and rules. Gu Nianji stared at the laptop in front of her and used one hand to enter a few DOS commands. She quietly bypassed the laptop's monitoring program and sent a few pings to the network world outside the system. Soon, most of the pings were complete and fast, but a few were blocked. The few that were blocked were when she tried to ping pages related to Hijichu or Lawyer He. So that was it, the lady boss here was in cahoots with Alice, right? Someone had really set up a shielding system for the network she had logged into. It was as if she had always been in a local area network, and all the information in this local area network had been filtered before being released. But blocking? Build a wall? Trying to trap a top computer hacker of the Blue Planet in a network wall? Are you sure? Gunyenji chuckled, but she also felt very upset. If she had to describe her mood, it might be like the old movie The Truman Show, when the main character first discovered that he had lived in a studio since he was a child. However, the protagonist was so excited that he was about to break down, but Gunyenji had been homeless for more than a month, so her endurance was much higher. She didn't collapse from excitement. Instead, she was so calm that she scolded herself for being a fool. She felt that her decision to run away at all costs a few days ago was too stupid. What are her advantages? Of course, it was her intelligence. It was not her physical strength. What a joke. Instead of taking a shortcut, he actually tried every possible way to escape, and even ended up injuring himself. Pa. Gunyenji slapped herself hard in the face. She had to remember this lesson. Using one's weakness to compete with someone else's strength was called a fool. Her slap was a bit hard. When the bartender brought her dinner that night, he saw the clear handprint on her face. His eyes widened in shock. Who hit you? Gunyenji was speechless. She was too embarrassed to say that she did it, so she could only look down and mumble, "Don't ask." Anyway, it was my fault. The bartender was speechless. He silently turned around and left. Then Gunyenji heard the bartender talking excitedly in German with someone outside the door. Gunyenji pouted and ignored him. She ate 2 mouthfuls of bread and went to wash up. Then she opened the door and said to the lady boss and bartender outside, "I'm going to watch a movie and then go to bed. Good night." This meant she was going to lock the door. The lady boss glared at the bartender and turned to Gunyenji with a smile. "Fine, you don't look too good. Go to bed early and wake up early tomorrow." Gunyenji nodded. "Thank you. The sooner I recover, the sooner I can leave here. I won't trouble you for too long." "Don't say that. I'm very happy you're here. You can trouble us for as long as you want. Don't be embarrassed." The lady boss quickly comforted her and personally walked her inside. Gunyenji nodded at her and closed the door in front of her, then locked it. After locking the door, Gunyenji sat on the bed and looked around the 4 corners of the room. If her internet was already being monitored, then this room was most likely being monitored as well. However, she didn't know where the cameras were installed. She also didn't have the tools the special forces often used to check for infrared cameras. However, if the other party had installed cameras here, then they must be monitoring through the internet. As long as it was on the internet, Gunyenji had a way to monitor it. She rolled her eyes and hugged her laptop to the bed. Then she pulled the blanket over herself and covered herself from head to toe. This way, even if there were cameras in the room, those people would only be able to see a cocoon-like blanket from the surveillance screen. They wouldn't be able to see what she was doing. Gunyenji hid under the dark blanket and smiled slightly. She removed the sling on her left arm from her neck, then began typing quickly with her fingers flying. The other party was monitoring her computer, so no matter what she was doing, the other party would be able to see it. Gunyenji used the opportunity of playing a Blu-ray movie on the computer to enter the DOS program. She quickly typed a series of commands and created a zombie image virtual hard drive for the computer. This zombie image virtual hard drive wasn't on the computer's hard drive. It was built on the internet and simulated using the computer's virtual memory. This laptop model was very old and didn't have a lot of memory. Gunyenji also dug out a large chunk of memory to create a zombie image virtual hard drive. The speed of the entire computer suddenly slowed down. Not only was her side slow, but the other party's monitoring of her would also slow down. Depending on the bandwidth of the internet, the other party's monitoring of her computer would lag from 1 minute to infinity. In other words, when the lag time was long enough, the other party's monitoring would be quietly frozen. The surveillance screen would always show the scene before it was frozen, so it was actually impossible to effectively monitor her. It was just like what people often saw on TV. In order to get rid of the surveillance camera in the elevator, people could stick a picture of the elevator being empty. Then the computer screen in the surveillance room would show the same scene forever. You would think there was no one in or out of the elevator, but in fact there was a group of people having a party inside and you wouldn't even know. Gunyenji patiently expanded her zombie image virtual hard drive step by step, constantly nibbling away at the network bandwidth. She only stopped when the Blu-ray movie on her side began to intermittently show disjointed sounds and images. The size of the virtual hard drive should have reached a critical point. She couldn't continue to expand it. She waited quietly for a few seconds for the computer to stabilize and confirm that the other party's monitoring had failed. Gu Nianji turned off the Blu-ray movie and at the same time began frantically programming with the most primitive DOS program. The other party wanted to use this blocked local area network to trick her and isolate her from the outside world. Then she would let them have a taste of the power of giving them a taste of their own medicine. Gu Nianji was very efficient when she went into programming mode. She spent the entire night writing a very useful and targeted application program. Based on the program's functions, Gu Nianji named it Devourer. She was almost cooped up under the covers for the entire night. She only lifted the covers and crawled out at dawn. Gu Nianji continued to tie up her left hand. After washing up, she began to sleep. She wanted to make up for last night's sleep. Because she was sure that someone was monitoring her computer, she planned to act at night from now on. Nighttime was the time when most people were the most sleepy. No matter how much preparation they made, they couldn't stay awake and stare at the unchanging images on the computer all the time. Gu Nianji slept soundly for the entire day and woke up at dinner time. She happily ate dinner with the bar owner and the bartender, then went to take a shower. After washing up, she returned to her room, turned on her laptop and clicked on the small program she had made. The small program almost instantly took up 99% of the network bandwidth. At the same time, it froze the monitoring page and bypassed the blocked keywords. Gu Nianji didn't need to hide under the covers anymore. She swaggered back on the bed and began to browse the internet. This time when she searched for Li Haiqing's case, many web pages with lawyer He or He Zhichu appeared. Unlike yesterday, it was as if He Zhichu didn't exist in this world at all. Since the web pages with He Zhichu's name appeared, it meant that she had bypassed at least one key-blocked keyword. Gu Nianji simply searched He Zhichu on the internet. The first thing that popped up was an official account that He Zhichu had set up on Germany's largest social media platform. When she saw the profile picture of her own back on the account, and the account notes that said, "Waiting for you to come home," Gu Nianji bit her lower lip tightly. Her heart ached and felt bitter. This was the first update. There was still 3 updates today. Let's remind everyone of the recommendation votes. The second update will be at 1 p.m., and the monthly vote will be 1,200 plus updates. The third update will be at 7 p.m. Come on, don't be careless and vote for the guaranteed monthly vote. P.S. When I say the update will be done. If everyone can't see it by the time it's time, you can refresh the directory multiple times, or exit the app to refresh again. Chapter 683. So Professor He had returned a long time ago and hadn't given up on searching for her. Gu Nianji looked closely at the photos of He Zhichu and realized he had really lost weight. His already frail body seemed even more slender, and there were dark circles under his eyes, symptoms of insomnia for a long time. Gu Nianji's eyes were red, but she bit her lower lip tightly to hold back the tears that were welling up in her eyes. She didn't let them fall. She continued to look at the news about He Zhichu and noticed a very obvious trend. From the time of her disappearance, He Zhichu's media exposure could be said to be very intense. Not only did he frequently appear in all major media outlets, but he also created a social media account specifically for his public exposure. Gu Nianji knew He Zhichu used to be a very low-key person. Not only did he keep a low profile, but he also seemed to want to hide himself. He had so much power in the United States and South America, but no one knew about it before. They all thought he was just a very outstanding legal talent. Later, she learned that He Zhichu's background was very powerful, but he didn't want to show it. He preferred to live like a normal university professor in the crowd. Why did such a person suddenly become so uncharacteristically high profile? What was the reason? It didn't take a genius to figure it out. Gu Nianji couldn't help feeling touched and happy, and even a little scared. Her fingers tried several times to send He Zhichu a private message, but she looked at the laptop in front of her and thought of the surveillance cameras. She resisted. The time wasn't right yet, so she couldn't alert him. If ALS was alerted, she didn't want to experience the Gestapo's methods again. Gu Nianji reluctantly closed He Zhichu's social media page and searched for news about the Wuxia Empire. A lot of Chinese news appeared on the search engine. Gu Nianji hadn't seen Chinese words in a long time, so she enjoyed reading them. Then, in an inconspicuous corner, she saw this piece of news. Hua Xiaoheng, Deputy Secretary General of the Supreme Military Council and our nation's youngest Major General, recently led a delegation to Cuba. The accompanying photo was of Hua Xiaoheng standing on a private plane and waving to the welcoming crowd below. He was wearing a very slim and handsome Major General's uniform, and the wide belt around his waist made him look like a crane. Standing high up in the plane, it was as if the vast blue sky and white clouds had become his backdrop. Although he was wearing sunglasses and she couldn't see his eyes, Gunyanji could tell from the slight smile on his face that he was in a good mood. Looking at Hua Xiaoheng's high-spirited photo, then looking at herself in the mirror with disheveled hair and dirty face, Gunyanji felt depressed. This was his current mission, right? Looking at the time, he should have left the country 2 days ago, so the previous mission should have been completed, right? They had already completed one mission, and now it was time for another. Did he call her? At that moment, Gunyanji regretted throwing her phone away. However, if Hua Xiaoheng had called her and found that her phone was out of service, would he not have guessed that something had happened to her? That was absolutely impossible. There was only one possibility, and that was that he hadn't called her. If he was still in the middle of a mission and didn't call her, she could understand. This was one of the costs of being with Hua Xiaoheng, and she was already prepared to accept it. But now that the previous mission had been completed, and even a new mission had begun, the two of them had been separated for a few months, and he still hadn't called her. She really couldn't take it anymore. At that moment, Gunyanji didn't know that Hua Xiaoheng was actually still in the middle of a previous mission. His current visit was only to wrap up the previous mission. However, her heart ached even more, and the indescribable feeling made her feel like a fishbone was stuck in her throat, and she began to feel irritated. She stood up and paced around the small room, constantly telling herself to calm down. She had to calm down and she had to calm down. Now that she was alone, no matter if she threw a tantrum or cried tears of grievance, no one would care. The only person she could rely on was herself. 09 Small say net. Raising her head, she forcefully suppressed the tears in her eyes. Rationally, she thought that Hua Xiaoheng definitely didn't know that something had happened to her, so he could still act happy in front of the media. Of course, it was also possible that at his position, no matter what he was thinking, no one could tell from his face. He was a high-ranking Imperial Major General, and he worked in intelligence work like the Special Operations Forces. Showing his emotions on his face was his failure. However, Gunyanji still had some doubts. If Hua Xiaoheng didn't know that something had happened to her, then why would the Special Operations Forces send people here? She still remembered the two Special Operations Forces members who had their throats slit. Gunyanji didn't want to contact Hijichu for now because she was worried about alerting the enemy because she had a bigger plan. She didn't want the two Special Operations Forces members who had come to save her to die in vain. Those two people had come to save her, right? Gunyanji bit her lower lip and whispered in her heart, it must be. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been killed. Glancing at Hua Xiaoheng's handsome face again, Gunyanji quietly closed the page and opened an open-source programming page on a hacker's website to continue writing the program. The original DOS was still too time-consuming to use, and Gunyanji didn't have that much time to waste on DOS. The initial program written in DOS needed to be perfected and optimized to achieve the effect she wanted. She wanted the group of people monitoring her to know that soon, they would feel the despair that she had once felt. Gunyanji endured the bitterness in her heart and stayed up all night to perfect and optimize her devourer exe as much as possible on the programming page on the hacker's website. Now that she opened the program, not only could she bypass the enemy's surveillance, but she could also completely disable the network control program that controlled the camera. Therefore, she didn't even need to find where the camera was. She only needed to make the camera lose contact with the enemy. Anyway, by the time she left, it would be too late for them to discover what had happened in this room. After writing the program, Gunyanji slept for the entire day and only woke up for dinner at night. The blonde lady boss was a bit worried about her health and asked, "Do you want to see a doctor? Why have you been sleeping so much lately?" Gunyanji smiled and said, "I have nothing to do, so of course I can only sleep. Time passes faster when I'm asleep, so it doesn't feel like I'm locked up." The bartender sitting across from her blushed. He coughed lightly and turned to the side to eat. The lady boss was calmer and smiled. "How can that be? You have complete freedom. Tell me, where do you want to go? I'll go with you." Gunyanji looked at her with a smile and shook her head. "No need, my injuries haven't healed yet. Actually, I heard that the body recovers faster when sleeping, so I decided to sleep more. That way I can recover faster." Yes, that's the reason. Sleeping is indeed the time when the body recovers itself. The blonde lady boss was visibly relieved and even served Gunyanji a bowl of clam soup. Gunyanji tasted it and found it familiar, so she put it down. "You don't like it?" The lady boss raised her eyebrows. "Tastes pretty good." "I like it, but I'm already full." Gunyanji patted her stomach. "My injuries haven't healed yet, and neither have my appetite. The lady boss quickly glanced at Gunyenji's left arm. It was still bandaged and she was clumsy when holding things. She also looked unbalanced when walking. She hadn't forgotten the bloody mess on Gunyenji's left arm that day. What a pity. Such flawless skin had such a heavy scratch. She would probably need skin grafts to cover up the wound. Alright, then you should rest early. I hope you can recover soon. The lady boss spoke very sincerely without the slightest hint of hypocrisy. Gunyenji muttered to herself but didn't show anything strange on her face. Now wasn't the time for a showdown. After washing up again, Gunyenji returned to her small room and locked the door. She turned on her laptop and opened her small program. She instantly regained control of the network. Gunyenji began to browse the internet again and downloaded the instant messaging software. Although the computer had a password protection, it was a piece of cake for Gunyenji to crack the download password. Gunyenji didn't think about cracking the password on the first night she stayed there because it would be immoral. But when she learned that the lady boss was in cahoots with ALS and that the bar was just a setup, she didn't care anymore. You guys are monitoring me anyway, so I'm just counterattacking. Gunyenji woke up in high spirits in the middle of the night. Her eyes sparkled as she sat in front of the laptop. Gunyenji, come on, let's get started. She opened the program and saw that her devourer, Exi, was working normally. After a day of nibbling away, it had successfully entered the surveillance network. She first pulled up the surveillance footage and saw that Gunyenji had created a zombie desktop on their monitor. In order to make it look realistic, she even used macro to record a small desktop program and randomly clicked on some web pages and games. Gunyenji had already deceived everyone and snuck in through the back door of their system. She was excited and nervous, because she didn't enter a normal network. It was the internal network of the German Federal Intelligence Service, formerly known as the Gestapo. This was the second monthly pass of 1,200 plus updates. There was still 3 updates today. A reminder to everyone for recommendation votes. The third update was at 7 p.m. Come on, don't be careless and vote for the guaranteed monthly pass. P.S. Thank you, sweetheart, for reading and rewarding 10,000 views. This person rewarded so many views. Could it be that if I read, I'll welcome my first leader? Alliance masters who read more would also add more chapters. Chapter 684. Gunyenji's Devourer. Exi was like a little beast scouting the way as it carried her to the German Federal Intelligence Agency's central control system. She wandered around the intranet and nervously searched for the information she was looking for. When she escaped that night, 4 Chinese men had died in the woods near the bar. Gunyenji was certain that 2 of them were bad guys impersonating her, and the other 2 were real Wuxia Imperial Special Operations Forces members. She touched the diamond earrings on her ears and hesitated. In the end, she didn't take them off. They were her only connection to Huoxiao. She knew it was dangerous to wear them, but she didn't want to take them off. She wanted to enter Al's intranet and find information on the 4 dead men. That morning, when the blonde bar owner told her about the tragedy in the woods, Gunyenji thought the case would once again spread like wildfire in Germany. After all, even the bar owner knew about it, but after that she didn't see any news online. It was as if what happened that night was a figment of her imagination. She finally understood that the bar owner knew so much not because the case was well known, but purely because she was in cahoots with ALS. She was probably also an intelligence agent from the German Federal Intelligence Agency. She probably told Gunyenji to get some information from her. Unfortunately, she had no idea why the Huaxia Empire would send people, so she didn't have a chance to leak the information. Gunyenji shrugged and continued to search the German Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet. From the website structure, the German Federal Intelligence Agency's website was divided into 8 major systems. Bureau 1 was the main intelligence agent, and ALS was the director. Gunyenji's hand paused and dug out an encrypted file from Bureau 1. The password was simple because some idiot intelligence agent had created a TXT file and stored it with the encrypted file. The TXT file was called. There were all kinds of passwords for all kinds of encrypted files. So when Gunyenji opened the file, she had the key to open all the encrypted files. Gunyenji was stunned when she successfully opened the encrypted file. The file was actually a list of intelligence agents. It included the intelligence agents from the German Federal Intelligence Agency who were hidden in various countries. She also saw the list of people hidden in the Huaxia Empire. This was really wearing out iron shoes and fruitless search, only to find it by chance without even looking for it. Gunyenji uploaded it to her cloud account without hesitation. Division 2 managed the signals. Division 3 did intelligence analysis. Division 4, however, added the most difficult password, and it wasn't in that stupid password file. Gu Nianji looked at the introduction outside and saw that Bureau 4 was the management of the Federal Intelligence Agency. They were all bureaucrats, so she couldn't be bothered to look at it. She didn't bother to crack the password, so she skipped over it. Division 5 was responsible for international counterterrorism, while Division 6 was responsible for technical support. The technician monitoring her now should be from Division 6. Gu Nianji's hands itched, so she drew a pig's head and saved it in Bureau SAXS encrypted file. Bureau 7 was responsible for training intelligence personnel. Gu Nianji wasn't interested in the training measures, but she thought that Huo and the others would be interested. She carefully selected a few documents and uploaded them to the cloud system. The last one was Bureau 8, which was responsible for counter-espionage activities. Gu Nianji perked up. Her instincts told her that all the information related to the deaths of the 4 Chinese men should be there. He clicked on it and looked through the folders one by one, flipping through the photos one by one. 3 hours later, when her eyes were almost blinded, she finally found the folder related to the deaths of the 4 Chinese men. She clicked on it. Not only were there various photos of the crime scene and the deceased from various angles, but there was also the analysis of the Federal Intelligence Agency's report. Gu Nianji skimmed through it and realized that ALS and the others had even discussed whether they should use the documents on the dead Chinese men to send a diplomatic note to the Wuxia Empire to question why they sent their intelligence agency personnel to Germany. That idea was rejected. The person didn't have a name and only had a code name, G, in the document. This G said that first, the documents were fake. If they pretended not to know and used the fake documents to question the Wuxia Empire's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it would only backfire and make them realize that Gu Nianji was in their hands. Gu Nianji trembled nervously when she suddenly saw her name in the top-secret documents. She almost couldn't hold the mouse steady. Her heart was pounding so hard that it was about to jump out of her throat. After finally calming down, Gu Nianji quickly downloaded the documents and immediately uploaded them to her cloud account. But at this moment, the network suddenly slowed down, and her upload stopped halfway. Gu Nianji's heart sank. Had someone discovered her? She looked at her watch and saw that 4 hours had passed. She had been too greedy. This was her first time invading the enemy's intranet, but she had stayed for too long and left too many traces. She knew that her actions were very crude, and if Zhao Liangzi found out, he would definitely scold her to death. However, this opportunity was too rare. She didn't want to give up this chance to help Huo and the Special Operations Forces find out all the secrets of the German Federal Intelligence Agency. As time passed, Gu Nianji's fingers flew quickly as she continued to write and add programs. 10 minutes later, her upload was still in a static state, but the warning system in her program had already started. This meant that the enemy might have already discovered that there was a problem with the surveillance and that an outsider had entered the intranet. What should she do? If she gave up this time, she might never have the chance to enter again. Also, if ALS and the others also had computer experts, it was possible that they would be able to find her, give up or continue. This was a fatal question. In the 1 minute that she debated with herself, Gu Nianji finally made a decision. She would do something big. She would let these arrogant white people know that even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered. It was fine if they didn't bite, but once they did, they would take advantage of their weakness and kill them. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and held onto the mouse to start the Devourer program's final system. After a while, she let go of the mouse and watched as the program she had written began to wreak havoc in the German Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet. At that moment, in the central control room of the German Federal Intelligence Agency, the alarms kept ringing and resonated through the entire base as the sky brightened. Hurry! Hurry! There's an enemy invasion. Where? Where? The intranet. You idiot! The intranet has been breached. Activate the emergency system. Pursue the intruder. We must track the IP of the origin of the program. Seeing that the situation was becoming more and more urgent, their best software engineer was still on the way, but it was already too late. If they didn't take the final measures, all of their secrets would be destroyed. This was a more serious loss than the highest commander of the German Federal Intelligence Agency being an enemy mole, because it meant that all of the top-secret information the German Federal Intelligence Agency had from the Gestapo era could be exposed. The Germans in the central control room all looked at each other with pale faces. Everyone was trembling and trembling. They didn't know how to face this situation. Alice yelled, "It's too late. Don't track the IP anymore. Cut off the power. Cut off the power immediately." Just as the mainframe's power was cut off, Gunyenji's Devourer EXE was activated and unleashed its final attack. It transformed into tens of thousands of small programs like white blood cells that devoured bacteria. It split up and became extremely fast. It devoured all the files in the Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet like a locust, regardless of whether they were encrypted or not, whether they were system files or data files. It shrunk them all and transferred them to external mailboxes at lightning speed. There were so many of them, and they were so fast that they had already completed all the devouring programs while the power was being cut off. Finally, the self-destruction program was activated. When Reinitz was urgently called over by ALS and stood in front of the huge mainframe of the Federal Intelligence Agency's central control system, he only saw a bright circle of light appear on the screen. A cute pink little pig walked out of the circle of light, rolled twice toward them, and then turned around with its back facing them. It revealed a short tail on its chubby little butt and wagged it. Then the circle of light gradually shrank, and just like that, the pink and tender little pig disappeared into the circle of light. Boom. Alice punched the mainframe heavily, his eyes bulging. This is too much. Don't let me find out who did this. This was the third watch. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. The next third watch should be a monthly vote of 1,500. The first watch tomorrow should be at 8 a.m., so don't refresh too early. Chapter 685. Chepsp. Gunyenji quietly spat out a word as she watched the pink piggy slowly disappear on her laptop. She gestured a gun with her hand and aimed at the screen. The last thing she did was send a private message to Hijichu's official social media account before the Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet completely collapsed. There was only one German acronym, Gestapo. The acronym was the abbreviation for Gestapo. Gunyenji didn't write anything else, and she didn't write her name because she didn't know if there were any other blocked words. Once she touched the blocked words, she would miss her only chance. At the same time, almost all the hacker organizations in the world noticed the huge change on the German Federal Intelligence Agency's website. Pink Piggy. The German Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet collapsed. Pink Piggy did it. Oh my god. This can't be any better. She's my idol. My goddess. Absolutely. How do you know it's her? It's not him? Are you stupid? Why would a man use a cute pink piggy? This is definitely a woman, and a very young and delicate one at that. Ah. Lifetime series. Witness history. Conversations like these flooded the bullet screens of all the major hacker organizations on the blue planet. This kind of dreamlike attack and retreat like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves couldn't be any more cool. From then on, the international hacker world gained a newcomer with the codename Pink Piggy. Her achievements spread to all the major hacker organizations on the Cerulean planet overnight. Even the network intelligence agencies of several major countries on the Cerulean planet, as well as the hacker organizations, were deeply impressed by her achievements and secretly sent out orders to recruit her. Because she had single-handedly broken into the German Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet and swept away all the resources and information, the damage to the German intelligence agency was incalculable. It wasn't an exaggeration to say it was incalculable, but it was truly incalculable. The secrets that had been kept since the Gestapo era were no longer secrets from that night onwards. And the most excited were the Eastern European hackers. Because of historical reasons, Eastern European hackers hated the German Federal Intelligence Agency far more than other countries, and even more than other departments in Germany. They were also the most diligent hackers in attempting to break into the German Federal Intelligence Agency's network. But after so many years, they had never actually entered their intranet. But tonight someone did it. Since then, this group of Eastern European hackers had become die-hard fans of the Pink Piggy. Many of them had even raised the banner of the Pink Piggy Reserve Team. Their symbol was the pink and tender piggy butt. Gunyenji was completely unaware of the commotion she had caused. This was because she did not know that the intranet of the intelligence agencies of various countries was under attack at all times. The attacks came from hackers, officials, and civilians. Therefore, this wonderful Operation Devour that she directed was basically witnessed by many people. Although they had only seen the surface, they were all experts in the industry. They were very clear about the destructive changes that had occurred in the internal system. The reason Gunyenji was able to single-handedly mess up the German Federal Intelligence Agency's central control system was because she was already in the Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet. Because the shielded local area network that the other party used to deceive and numb her in an attempt to extract information was actually an extension of the Federal Intelligence Agency's intranet, so it was very easy to go against the flow. Many things that were so powerful that they could not be defeated were defeated from the inside. This was also the easiest and most thorough way to defeat a person, a nation, or a country. Gu Nianji's actions invisibly matched this principle. When Gu Nianji started the Operation Devour, the Wuxia Empire's Special Operations Forces also inevitably noticed it. And they were luckier than the intelligence agencies of other countries because they received an endless stream of blessings from Germany. Thousands of emails marked as top secret were delivered like snowflakes to the tens of thousands of email accounts owned by the Special Operations Forces. When they opened them, they saw that they were all in German. After a slight translation, everyone's expression was dreamy. This. Could the pink piggy be one of us? Who? Is it Lieutenant Colonel Zhao? Lieutenant Colonel Zhao is on a visit to Cuba with the boss. How could it be him? Then who is it? No matter who it is, this person has made a great contribution to our country. Oh my, so many people. He practically wiped out the entire German Gestapo. This kind of great contribution can be said to be unprecedented and will never be replicated again. The personnel on duty in the Special Operations Forces Central Control Room looked at the endless stream of emails, and their expressions were like they were looking at rare treasures. However, rare treasures had a price, and this information was priceless. Unfortunately, it was the eve of the Wuxia Empire's Prime Minister election. Although the Special Operations Forces had never interfered with internal affairs, due to the special circumstances of this year's election, the two leading candidates, Bai Jianqing and Tan Dongbang, both requested the Special Operations Forces to intervene as observers of the election and monitor the electronic voting systems across the country. This was because they all agreed that only the Special Operations Forces would maintain a neutral attitude in the election and not be biased towards any side. It could also be said that both of them believed that they had connections in the Special Operations Forces, so if they were to be biased, they would only be biased towards their side. Therefore, with the authorization of General Ji and Speaker Long, the Special Operations Forces, under the leadership of the Deputy Chief, organized a group of highly skilled and loyal personnel to stay in the Central Control Room and monitor the electronic voting systems across the country. This was also the reason why He Xiaoheng couldn't return to the Empire for now. General Ji actually didn't want the Special Operations Forces to be involved in internal affairs, but the two candidates had come with a huge demand from the public, and he couldn't resist. In the end, the only thing he could think of was to keep He Xiaoheng out of it as much as possible. That way, regardless of the outcome, He Xiaoheng could continue to be the impartial Major General Chief of the Special Operations Forces. Before the results of the voting were out, none of these people were allowed to leave the building, nor were they allowed to have any contact with the outside world. Tonight, they were doing the final confirmation and maintenance before the election to lay a solid foundation for tomorrow's voting, but they didn't expect to encounter such a big drama. Other than the Special Operations Forces, the Wuxia Empire Secret Task Force also noticed the strange behavior of the German intelligence agency, but similarly, their focus was on the election that was to be held tomorrow, so they had no time to care about anything else. In the center of this storm, the German Federal Intelligence Agency's Central Control Room was eerily quiet. Reinitz's expression was calm as he casually patted Al's shoulder. "Don't worry, let me take a look." He sat down in front of the central control system, and his slender fingers quickly entered a series of commands as he said, "This hacker is a woman. She can't be more than 25 years old or even younger. She's a genius but also a bit childish. If you have the chance to find her, hand her over to me. I can help you train the most powerful hacker." "You think this person is a woman just because of the pink piggy?" Al's expression was very gloomy, and he was about to go berserk at any moment. "That's not all. Looking at her procedures and the way she does things, it's more like a woman's," Reinitz said calmly as he hit the enter key. Ellis kicked the table in frustration. "Don't care if she's a man or a woman. Hurry up and find the whereabouts of those emails." "I'm looking into it now." Ellis stood behind him and was dazzled by what he saw. He couldn't help but say, "Didn't you find the email addresses? Why are you still looking into it?" Reinitz's voice carried a strong sense of praise and admiration. "The person who wrote this program is really a genius. She can turn parts into parts and parts into parts, and it works smoothly. She also considered extreme environments and only exploded at the last moment, sweeping away all the documents. She's really too creative and too capable." Ellis glared at him with a sour expression. "You're speaking up for our enemy. Do you know that you're very dangerous? Reinitz glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. His dark blue eyes glanced at him, and it was as if there was an endless amount of pressure. Ellis kept quiet and stood to the side with a fierce expression as he watched Reinitz continue to investigate. After an hour, Reinitz shook his head with difficulty and sighed. I've never seen such a smart programmer. The person who wrote this program is really a genius. Definitely a genius. As he spoke, he turned his chair and looked at Alice. Alice, if you can find out who she is, you must recruit her. With her help, you'll definitely be able to win by a surprise move. Better than you? Alice suddenly threw out this sentence. He was very unhappy that Reinitz was diminishing his own ambition and boosting his opponent's prestige. Her skills might not be as good as mine. She's a newbie hacker, but her talent is really too high. However, his talent is just too high. Given time, he will be able to surpass me easily. Reinitz shook his head with a smile and said again, Don't doubt me. If you find her, hand her over to me. I'll train you into the best hacker expert. The enemy was too strong, so strong that Reinitz's love for talent was aroused. Alice sneered. When I find her, the first thing I'll do is skin her alive. She dared to mess with our system like this. That's enough for a life sentence. Reinitz coughed. Are you sure? Even if she's a woman, I'll skin her alive. LS glared at him. Seeing that Reinitz had stopped, S asked again. Found her? Reinitz shook his head. No. Then why aren't you continuing? Al's eyes were red with impatience. All the materials in the system have been transferred. Why aren't you pursuing her? How am I supposed to pursue her? Reinitz couldn't stop praising the little program. Genius. She really is a genius. I didn't expect this person to use the wheat and chessboard theory on her email transfer program. Just this alone has already surpassed all the software engineers in this world. ALS was speechless. This is the first update. There are 2 updates today. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. The second update at 7 p.m. We've reached 1,500 votes for the third update. Moi. Chapter 686. You don't understand, right? Reinitz smiled as he looked at Al's confused expression. Let me first tell you what the chessboard wheat theory is. It's a fable from ancient India. The king wanted to reward his minister and asked him what reward he wanted. The minister pointed at the 64 squares of the Go board and said, You only need to reward me with a grain of wheat. For example, give me 1 grain of wheat on the first square, 2 grains on the second square, 4 grains on the third square, and 8 grains on the fourth square. Each time, double the amount of the previous square. Ellis was confused. What does that have to do with anything? And it's not that much. Each time, it's only double the amount of the previous one. Not that much? Do you know how many grains there are in total if we calculate it by doubling the amount of the 64 squares? It's a total of 18446744073709551651615 grains. Reinitz looked at the screen expressionlessly and said calmly, 100 years ago, the entire world needed 500 years to produce that many grains. LS frowned. But what does this have to do with the forwarding of the email? The program's email forwarding is based on the chessboard wheat theory. Each time it's forwarded, it's double the amount of the previous one. Plus, it's randomly selected mailboxes. It's only used for forwarding, and it's not stored in the forwarded mailbox. The goal is to prevent people from tracing the email's whereabouts. So how do you find it? If we convert the number of grains into the number of times it's forwarded, then in the past hour, it's been forwarded a total of 18446744073709551651615 times. If we convert it to time, if we calculate each time by 1/10 of a second, that's 58 billion years. Ellis, are you sure you want to continue this investigation for so long? Ellis almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Who is so crafty? Who created this D*net program? I'm going to skin her alive. I swear I'm going to skin her alive. Don't tell me there's nothing we can do. Reinitz looked at the results of his investigation, and his eyebrows slowly furrowed. The program's forwarding numbers were simply geometrical as it traversed the network. The other party was very cunning. Every mailbox that received mail was also a mailbox that forwarded mail. Just like that, they forwarded mail one by one. In the end, it felt like they had returned to the starting point. Of course, this was an illusion. Reinitz knew that the documents must have gone somewhere, but he couldn't find out where it was even with his abilities. If he used the extreme method, there might be a chance. However, even the most powerful supercomputer in the world would need tens of billions of years to calculate such an astronomical amount of calculation. Can you afford to wait? Moreover, electronic information spread too quickly. If they couldn't find and destroy it immediately, leaks would be inevitable. Reinitz sighed and shook his head. A large-scale leak is inevitable. The only thing we can do now is to activate emergency measures. Alice was stunned. Emergency measures? Yes, all intelligence personnel should change their keys and stop all activities. All personnel abroad should return immediately. No matter what they are doing, stop immediately. Reinitz paused and said, also, the system here is backed up every day. Give me the most recent backup. The other party had deliberately planned to do something big, so they must have started scouting a few days ago. If we want to find traces, we can only go to the system backups from a few days ago. You make the decision. I'll listen to you. Ellis waved his hand, his face pale. Reinitz sat alone in the central control room and pulled up the last backup before today's accident. The system would be backed up twice a day at 12 noon and midnight. There would be overall backups at different times and different locations. Reinitz had his own tracing program in the system. After pulling out the backup, he started his own tracing program. Like killing a virus, he began scanning the system before the incident. This program could detect unstable factors that invaded the system. It didn't necessarily have to be a Trojan horse. As long as it didn't match the system key, it would be marked as an accidental program. It would take at least 24 hours to completely scan the entire system. Reinitz wasn't in a hurry. He crossed his arms as he sat in the central control room. He was very confident. He would definitely find this person. It was finally over. Gunyenji looked out the window and saw that the sky was already bright. The original desktop appeared on the laptop screen. All traces of her previous input had been erased by the Devourer program. The laptop was now in the same state as before she used DOS to avoid the blocked words. Gunyenji went to the bathroom to wash her face and took the laptop out to look for the bar owner. Look, why can't I go online? The bar owner seemed to have a lot on her mind. She looked at the computer absent-mindedly and said, it's probably because the circuit here is broken. I can't do anything about it. I see. Gunyenji looked disappointed. Okay, then I'll go watch a movie. The bartender couldn't stand Gunyenji's depressed look. He quickly took out his phone and gave it to her. I have data here. Go play with it. Thank you. Gunyenji's eyes lit up. She shook the bartender's arm in surprise. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The bartender's ears quietly turned red. The bar owner suddenly turned her head and shouted at the bartender, what are you thinking? Are you very rich? You even borrowed money from me yesterday to pay your phone bill. Where did you get the data? Gunyenji was speechless. The bartender was shocked. He instinctively tightened his grip on the phone and looked at Gunyenji helplessly. Gunyenji withdrew her hand and said sheepishly, it's okay, it's okay. I'll go back to sleep. She took the laptop back to her room and locked the door. She stretched and went to bed. She hadn't slept the night before and was almost dead tired. She immediately fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. Hijichu opened his social media account every day as usual to check the private messages. His fingers quickly swiped across them. He frowned slightly and was a bit impatient. There were too many infatuated private messages. If it weren't for Nyenji, he wouldn't have bothered to read their confessions. He was afraid that he would miss Nyenji's private messages because of his impatience. Therefore, even though the veins on his forehead were popping, he didn't say a word and finished reading them all. With how popular his account was, he received thousands of private messages every day. It took him a few hours to read them one by one. He had been in Berlin for 2 days and had already sent many people to search everywhere, but there was still no news. That day, the first thing he did when he woke up was to take out his phone to check the private messages on his social media account. As he browsed through them one by one, his fingers suddenly paused. Ijichu sat up in bed. His sleeping robe was half covered, revealing his exquisite collarbones and well-defined chest. However, his eyes were only fixed on his phone. There was a private message. There was another private message with only one word on it, Gestapo. Ijichu was very proficient in German. He only needed one glance to recognize that it was the German abbreviation for Gestapo. The fog that had been shrouding him suddenly dissipated. The thing that had been making him feel uneasy for the past few days had finally been confirmed. He had already begun to suspect that Gunyenji's disappearance had something to do with the German government. With the intensity of his search, he would have found her long ago if the government hadn't intentionally hidden it. He had already planned to use other methods to directly pressure the German government if he still couldn't find Nyenji one day. This private message from an unknown source confirmed Hijichu's suspicions. Only the Gestapo would be able to wipe away all traces of Gu Nianji's disappearance. Normal gangs wouldn't be able to do it. The Gestapo. If they didn't hand over Nianji, he would completely change the German Federal Intelligence Agency. Getting up from the bed, Hijichu put on his Bluetooth headset and washed up while assigning tasks to his subordinates. Go and find out which strongholds the German Federal Intelligence Agency have in Berlin and want all of their locations. Also, find out if anything special has happened recently. Hijichu's subordinates were very efficient. By noon they quickly returned with a lot of information. Mr. He, the Federal Intelligence Agency has a headquarters in Berlin and a few branch offices. Also, there should be various disguise locations. It's not easy to find them for now, so please give us some time. Hijichu frowned unhappily. Do you think I would let you investigate if I had time? His subordinates didn't want to argue with their master, so they could only change the topic. But yesterday I heard that the Federal Intelligence Agency suffered a huge setback and is currently in a state of paralysis. Everyone is pretending to be dead and won't speak properly no matter what I ask. Oh. Hijichu was a bit interested and leaned forward to ask, what setback? Their internal network was breached last night, and I heard they suffered heavy losses. Hijichu was speechless. I also heard that the hacker is very powerful. Her codename is Pink Piggy. Hijichu. What do you mean? Why is she called Pink Piggy? Hijichu's heart was beating uncontrollably, and his head was starting to hurt again. I heard the international hacker community is saying that this Pink Piggy is a young girl and a genius programmer. Hijichu's subordinates also yearned for this Pink Piggy, and their faces were full of dreamy expressions as they spoke. Hijichu looked at him with disdain and said coldly, wipe that covetous look off your face. Is she someone you can covet? Mr. He, I just admire this kind of person. There's no need to use such a serious word as covet. The subordinate was more familiar with Hijichu, so he smiled cheekily and defended himself. Hijichu snorted and gently stroked his delicate jaw with one hand. He looked down at the private message on his phone, Gestapo, and said slowly, send a letter to the Federal Intelligence Agency. Just say that a friend of mine is a guest there and it's time to send her back. This was the second watch. Today's second watch had already ended. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. P.S. Thank you to the Guanghan Palace Mistress A and Lin Xiuzi for tipping 10,000 Qidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Only Reading Makes People Happy in Life, for tipping more than 7,000 Qidian coins. There were also many people who tipped hundreds and thousands of Qidian coins. Thank you all for your love. Mwah. Chapter 687. Hijichu knew very well that the German Federal Intelligence Service was currently in a state of chaos. He didn't dare to be too optimistic about when their boss would see the letter and respond. So after sending the letter, he didn't just sit around and wait for the other party's reply because he couldn't wait any longer. Hijichu began to actively search for partners among the upper echelons of German politics. As long as they could help him get the person from the Federal Intelligence Agency, he would agree to any conditions and help with anything. At that moment, the Federal Intelligence Agency was truly in chaos. The mail system was also in a state of complete standstill. Whether it was email, instant messaging, traditional letters, or express delivery, everything was frozen. ALS led Bureau 1's intelligence personnel and the German military police to control the security of the entire headquarters. Fully armed soldiers and plain-clothed agents surrounded the headquarters of the Federal Intelligence Agency. No one was allowed to enter and no one was allowed to leave. Reinitz sat quietly in the central control room for an entire day and night. He basically didn't sleep for 24 hours as he watched his tracing program scan the entire backup system files. As he expected, the system's abnormality began the day before and the night before. Reinitz began to look through the abnormal files that the program found and eliminated them. He knew very well that the Federal Intelligence Agency's central control system was divided into a local area network and a perimeter network. The perimeter network and the local area network were completely separated, so it was impossible to break into the local area network from the perimeter network unless there was a traitor who directly built a channel between the perimeter network and the local area network. And the abnormal system files showed that this time their system was hacked, not by a hacker from the perimeter network, but from within the local area network. Could there be a traitor? But if there really was a traitor with such amazing programming skills, such bold imagination and such genius algorithms, how could they be unknown? And to be a traitor for someone else? This didn't make sense. Reinitz calmly clicked the mouse and read the files line by line. Finally, when it was almost 5 in the afternoon, Reinitz found traces of the other party's login in the system that hadn't been erased in time. He continued to follow the clues and finally found the model of the other party's computer. Reinitz suddenly froze. He saw the serial number on the computer. It was the bureau's computer. He then checked the owner of the computer. It was Tina, the owner of the bar that Gunyenji was at. Reinitz immediately understood who this pink piggy was. Although Tina was the owner of the computer, she had been letting Gunyenji use it for the past few days. Of course, there was a tacit understanding of why. I really didn't expect this. This is too unexpected, really too unexpected. They had never known that Gunyenji was a computer expert. He really hit it well. Who would have thought that an amazing 18-year-old genius law student was also a computer expert? Xiaoheng from the Wuxia Empire had surprised them again and again. This time he had caused them to stumble again. Wasn't his luck a little too good? Reinitz silently read through all the problematic system files and closed the page expressionlessly. He rubbed the space between his eyebrows. No matter how strong his body was, he couldn't stand staying in front of the computer for a whole 36 hours. Walking out of the central control room, Reinitz let out a long sigh. He looked very tired. With one hand in his trouser pocket and the other holding a cigarette, he lowered his head and walked out of the building listlessly. Standing in the open space in front of the building, he lit the cigarette and took a deep puff. The facts were now very clear. Gunyenji had hacked into their system and taken all the files. She must have sent them back to the Wuxia Empire, right? Reinitz took out his phone and scrolled through the news from the Wuxia Empire. He remembered very clearly that the Wuxia Empire was voting on this day and night for the general election. Because one of the popular candidates, Bai Jianxing, was particularly concerned about the murder of Li Haiqing, a female exchange student in Germany. Therefore, there was a certain amount of attention in Germany. And because it was the weekend, many Germans were at home watching TV, waiting for the results of the Wuxia Empire's general election to be announced. It could be said that the Wuxia Empire's prime minister election was the most intense in decades. Because in previous elections, there was always one candidate who had an absolute lead in the polls early on. This time, however, both candidates' poll ratings simply rose in a spiral, and no one had an absolute lead. Reinitz looked at his phone. It was past 5 in the afternoon in Berlin, Germany. It was just past midnight in the Wuxia Empire, which meant that the voting deadline had just passed. They should start counting the votes now. No one knew who would emerge victorious until the very last moment. Fortunately, the Wuxia Empire was in a tense time for the general election, so Reinitz predicted that they wouldn't immediately pay attention to the information Gunyenji brought back. Or rather, they wouldn't immediately start working on it. But wanting them to spit out the information they had obtained? How was that possible in the electronic age? At that moment, the Wuxia Empire's general election was being counted in the eyes of the world. At the same time, Xiaoheng, who was in Cuba, received a call from General Ji. He explained to him why he had to stay abroad. Xiaoheng smiled. I understand. Don't worry. General Ji was also very emotional. It's finally over. The entire nation has been struggling for so long, and it's finally going to stop. He then said, I'll give you a new mission now. Xiaoheng quickly stood up. Please give me your instructions, Chief. The results of the general election are actually out. General Ji paused. Tan Dongbang won. Now the military wants you to go to the United States immediately and use the military special plane to bring Tan Guiren back. You have to be quick. You have to get on the plane with her and fly out of the United States before the results are announced to the world. Xiaoheng nodded helplessly. Yes, Chief. He wouldn't complain to General Ji. Although he didn't approve of the Tan's actions, he wouldn't have any other thoughts other than remaining silent and neutral from his standpoint. Okay, Xiaoheng. You know I've always had high hopes for you. I hope you won't disappoint me again. General Ji hung up after saying that. Xiaoheng's heart froze. He sensed that General Ji seemed to be a bit unhappy with him, but he didn't ask further. He was going back anyway, so it wouldn't be too late to talk to General Ji later. After General Ji hung up, Xiaoheng looked down at his phone. His finger rubbed over Gunyenji's name for a while, but he finally resisted the urge to call her. He wasn't an 18 or 19-year-old kid anymore. No matter how much he missed her, he wouldn't show it. He had gone on missions in the past, and the longest he had been gone for was 6 months. However, he had never missed her as much as he did now, even though they had only been apart for 3 months, 20 days, 18 hours, 32 minutes and 24 seconds. He hadn't contacted her in the past few months and had only sent her a birthday present once. Would she be angry? In He Xiaoheng's impression, Gu Nianji had never been truly angry with him. Acting coquettishly doesn't count. Because of his work and the habits he had developed over the years, he sometimes neglected her. She would only silently be sad for a while before smiling at him again and making up. He truly felt sorry for this girl who was so obedient and sensible that it made his heart palpitate. So this time he wanted to give her some compensation and a surprise. For this surprise all the waiting was worth it. The first thing he wanted to do after returning to the United States was to immediately take Gu Nianji to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register their marriage. He had prepared all the materials and couldn't wait a moment longer. He could even imagine Gu Nianji's cute little face. When she heard that he was going to take her to register for marriage, her already large eyes would widen even more. Her round, dark and clear eyes were like that of a newborn animal. She was filled with curiosity towards this world and him. It was a pair of eyes that he couldn't resist. The corners of He Xiaoheng's lips curled up slightly. He turned to Zhao Liangzi and ordered, "Inform the American embassy that we are going to the United States. Ask them to complete the paperwork for us. The plane will take off in 10 minutes." At that moment, Reinitz was standing under a tree in front of the Central Control Building. He had just finished smoking a cigarette. He threw the cigarette butt away and went straight to the direction of the bar Gu Nianji was at. On the way his phone rang. Reinitz used his Bluetooth headset to answer the call. "Reinitz, I heard that you found the pink piggy?" Al's voice was anxious, happy, and had a hint of cruel excitement in it. Reinitz instinctively denied it. "No, but I found a lead." "I thought you found it." Alice was immediately disappointed. "What lead? Do you need my help?" "Not at the moment. I'll go confirm it first." Reinitz turned off his headset and continued to drive. It was already 6 o'clock in the evening when he arrived at the entrance of the bar. "Reinitz, you're here." The blonde lady owner Tina walked up anxiously. "How is it? Is the situation better over there?" "Who did it?" "They're too arrogant." The corners of Reinitz's mouth twitched. He wanted to smile but he couldn't. He didn't stand on ceremony with Tina and asked directly, "Where's Sirius?" "You mean Gu Nianji? She's still in that little room." A trace of disdain flashed across Tina's eyes. "She only knows how to sleep every day. I don't know why she's so sleepy." "What a pig." Reinitz's mind flashed with the image of a pink and tender little pig, and he couldn't help but laugh. Tina was shocked. "How can you still laugh at a time like this?" Reinitz clenched his fists and coughed quietly against his lips. "I can't even laugh. Do I have to cry?" He brushed past the lady owner and went to find Gu Nianji. This was the first night watch. Today was the third night watch. "Thank you to everyone for your monthly votes yesterday. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. The second night watch was 1,500, and the third night watch was at 1 p.m. Thank you to Chidian's _Sing for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Thank you to Buckle Readings, whose heart is sweet, for tipping 10,000 buckle coins yesterday. Moi. Chapter 688. When Reinitz arrived at the bar, Gu Nianji had just woken up and didn't want to get up yet. She hugged the blankets and rolled around on the bed, calculating how long it would take for Professor He to see her private message and think of a way to avenge her. She believed that with He Zhichu's status and ability, he would be more suitable to deal with the German government than brothers Xiong and He Xiao. Gu Nianji didn't want to cause a diplomatic dispute between Germany and the Wuxia Empire because of her, so it was best for He Zhichu, an unknown foreigner, to help her. Deep in her heart, she felt that she might not leave alive this time. After all, she had turned the German Federal Intelligence Service upside down. Would those people who respected the Gestapo as their seniors let her go? Even if she thought about it, they wouldn't. Also, she had too little time to prepare. In the end, in order to maximize the benefits, she fought with her life on the line and didn't use the last precious time to erase her login traces. Instead, she chose to devour all the emails. The ingenious use of the chessboard and wheat theory allowed her to forward 64 emails within the last few seconds of the power outage. That way, the other party wouldn't be able to trace all the emails even after billions of years. Because tracking the emails needed to be done one by one, time was linear. However, she could forward emails to multiple emails at the same time, and time was shared. The two were fundamentally different. Even if they found out one day that the Wuxia Empire had the documents, it would only be their guess because they would never have any physical evidence to prove it. Wasn't this how the espionage activities between countries played out? Gu Nianji closed her eyes and laid on the bed, trying her best not to think about the consequences of being discovered. She used the fantasy that she would go back, that she would definitely go back, to numb herself. In her mind, she envisioned being picked up by Hijichu, returning to the Wuxia Empire with him, and enjoying the beautiful future with Machichi. After bypassing the censored terms, she had already seen the results of Li Haiqing's case online. Because of Seth's sudden death, Li Haiqing's case had been closed. The other woman in the same case, Nina, was sentenced to 50 years without bail for assisting in murder and rape. Under Professor He's strong pressure, the German court had already appointed another judge to try the civil case. The Roslau regional government and police, as well as Seth's mother, Ramona, faced a sky-high compensation of 1 billion euros. Of course, the other party was dissatisfied and was appealing. What happened next was none of Gunyenji's concern. She was confident that Professor He would handle the case properly. Also, Major General Hua, who was in Cuba, hadn't called her for so long. She didn't want to talk to him anymore. This time he would know how angry she was because no matter how he coaxed her, she couldn't hear or see him. If he came back and knew he would never see her again, would he be angry or sad? Unfortunately, she wouldn't have the chance to know, right? Gunyenji, who was lost in her reverie, was almost moved to tears by herself. Suddenly there were a few knocks on the door. All the atmosphere was gone. How annoying. Gunyenji pouted unhappily and closed her eyes to continue playing dead. She refused to respond. Reinitz knocked on the door for a while and saw that there was no one inside. Feeling anxious, he took out a special key and put it in the keyhole. With a click, he opened the door. Gunyenji, damn it! She had locked the door from the inside. How did this person unlock the door? The trust between people was gone, wasn't it? Gunyenji turned her head angrily and was about to accuse the lady boss of publicly violating her privacy when the person who appeared in front of her wasn't the blonde lady boss. Instead, it was Reinitz's religiously handsome face looking down at her from above. His face had the familiar look of hopelessness, as if all the joy in the world had nothing to do with him. Gunyenji's heart sank and her palms instantly sweated. Oh no, why is it Reinitz? He came too fast, as expected of the Terminator of Sweet Dreams. Gunyenji immediately remembered what Reinitz had said to her before. She remembered that he had said he was a relatively successful software engineer and had set up a small company that was later acquired. Now that she thought about it, those were probably Reinitz's words of humility. His software programming ability couldn't be as simple as being relatively successful. Reinitz, whom she hadn't seen for a long time, suddenly appeared. There could only be one reason. Gunyenji wasn't narcissistic enough to think that it was her Mary Sue shining brightly and winning over all the outstanding men. Reinitz coming here to see her was probably because she had been exposed. Damn. She had really been exposed too quickly. Gunyenji wiped the sweat from her palms on the bedsheets and said calmly, Reinitz, can you go out for a bit? I need to get up and change my clothes, wash my face and brush my teeth. Reinitz didn't move and just stood in front of her bed with his arms crossed. His blue eyes stared at her without blinking, as if he wanted to see her true inner world through her calm expression. Gunyenji felt very uncomfortable under his stare and braced herself to say again, Reinitz, please go out for a bit. I need to get up and change my clothes. Reinitz finally agreed but didn't turn around to leave. Instead, he turned around and sat on a single sofa against the wall across from her bed. He crossed his legs and lit a cigarette in his hand as he said calmly, Change. Gunyenji was speechless. How shameless. With a sullen expression, she wrapped herself in a thin blanket and got up from the bed. She took the clothes by the bed and went to the bathroom. She purposely dawdled in the bathroom for a long time and waited for her emotions to calm down before opening the bathroom door to ask, Tell me, what do you want to do with me? Reinitz looked at her with confusion and finally said, When did you find out? He was asking her when she found out that the bar owner and the bartender were Al's people. Gunyenji laughed lightly and said, Do you want to know? Actually, I found out there was something wrong with you first, and then I naturally found out there was something wrong with the bar owner and the bartender. This answer surprised Reinitz once again. He narrowed his blue eyes and stared at Gunyenji's beautiful face. Although she was a bit haggard, there was a more delicate beauty to her. He couldn't take his eyes off her even more than when he first saw her. There's something wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Reinitz asked calmly as he gently covered his left wrist with his right hand. Only he knew how fast his pulse was beating. It's very simple. Gunyenji tilted her head and said, In the beginning, you wanted to dispel my suspicions and let me eat my food first. That was when they were in Mother Hannah's cabin. Reinitz froze. That early? But she didn't show it at all. Even he was fooled by her. This kind of habit isn't a normal person's habit. It can't be described as considerate. This is clearly a habit of field agents, Gunyenji said calmly and gestured with her hand. Gunyenji said calmly and gestured with her hands. Someone who knows about this habit and uses it to help dispel other people's suspicions can only be a secret agent. What about you? How did you know? Are you also a special agent? Reinitz calmed down and began to ask Gunyenji. Gunyenji shrugged and said nonchalantly, I want to be a special agent, but they won't accept me. But I don't believe you don't know my identity and who I grew up with. It was no secret that the Special Operations Forces even had a spy. Reinitz looked at her silently and said dryly, That's all? That's too careless. Of course it's more than that. Gunyenji counted on her fingers. Also, you say you're a software engineer, but your marksmanship was too good that night when you led me on the run. I've seen too many people with good marksmanship in this world, but among so many sharpshooters, only one person's marksmanship is better than yours. How could someone like that be just a nameless software engineer? Do you believe it? I don't believe it anyway. Reinitz stared at Gunyenji, his blue eyes gradually becoming obsessed. After a while he slowly nodded. I see. It looks like you planned this from the start. Same here. Gunyenji smiled fakely. Didn't you guys also plan this? Tell me, how long did you guys set this line up? How many big fish did you catch? Seeing Gunyenji still refuse to admit defeat at this point and not even take a verbal loss, Reinitz suddenly became deeply jealous of Hua Xiaoheng. Why was he able to obtain this genius girl's unswerving care and support? Why? This is the second monthly vote of 1,500 plus updates. It's the third update today, so thank you all for your monthly votes yesterday. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Third update at 7 p.m. Moi. Chapter 689. The corners of Reinitz's mouth twitched. He stood up with both hands in his trouser pockets, and his nonchalant words struck Gunyenji so hard that she couldn't even breathe. I cast the long line, but I didn't catch the big fish. Reinitz took 2 steps forward and stood in front of Gunyenji. He leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, Look, the person you've always wanted to protect still hasn't come to save you. It's such a shame. With that, Reinitz turned around and walked out of Gunyenji's small room. Hearing the sound of the door lock, Gunyenji knew that she was really under house arrest this time. They had already shed all pretense of cordiality and stopped role-playing, so she naturally didn't have the treatment of the female lead. From now on she should be an obedient prisoner, right? Gunyenji curled up from the bed and hugged her knees as she sat on the edge of the bed. She silently stared at the snow-white wall in front of her, lost in thought. Reinitz locked Gunyenji's room and handed the key to Tina. Keep an eye on her. There's a lot of things we haven't asked yet. Don't let her escape. Tina held the key and said in surprise, What's going on? Does it have something to do with her? Other than Reinitz, no one thought that Gunyenji was the pink piggy who had turned their world upside down. After all, she was only an 18-year-old girl with outstanding qualifications in the law. How could she know how to use a computer? There were many types of top students. At most, they thought it had something to do with her. She's an important clue, but she didn't say anything. Reinitz was vague. Reinitz spoke vaguely. He was also very conflicted. He had always been very decisive, but this was the first time he had shown indecisiveness. Tina looked in the direction Reinitz had left with a complicated expression and couldn't help but call out, Reinitz, do you know what you're doing? Reinitz's footsteps paused and stopped, but he didn't turn around. He raised his head and looked at the dark night sky. He didn't say anything and continued to walk forward. He got in the car and started it. The headlights were so bright that Tina instinctively covered her eyes with her arm. The engine of Reinitz's sports car roared, and he quickly disappeared into the alley in front of the bar like an arrow. The bartender was also an agent from the Federal Intelligence Service. He looked worriedly in the direction Reinitz had disappeared, then looked at the door lock on Gunyenji's side. He asked quietly, What happened? Are you really going to lock her up? Don't worry about it. Go home, I'll watch over here today. The lady boss, Tina, waved her hand and let the bartender go home. Only the owner, Tina, and Gunyenji were left at the bar. Because she knew that Gunyenji was related to the hacker, Pink Piggy, Tina now hated Gunyenji to the core and wouldn't even let her have dinner. Gunyenji hadn't been hungry at all because she'd been in high spirits during her fight with Reinitz. She was so sleepy that she went straight to bed. When it was past midnight, she suddenly heard the screech of brakes outside the door. Gunyenji was woken up by the noise. She rubbed her eyes and wondered if Reinitz had returned to interrogate her again. In the end she was wrong. The person who came was ALS. He chased after her with a murderous look on his face. Tina yawned and opened the door to the bar to let ALS in. She muttered, "It's so late. Are you in a hurry to reincarnate?" "Reincarnate? I'm in a hurry to get an abortion." ALS glared at her. "Is Gunyenji still here? I'm taking her away." Tina was even more shocked. "What's wrong?" "Reinitz came in the evening and locked her in the room. Now you're saying you're taking her away. Why don't you two fight it out? Whoever wins gets to keep it." Alice snorted. "Reinitz is obsessed with women. Don't worry about him." He had just found out that Gunyenji was the person related to the Pink Piggy hacker case. He was furious. He angrily rushed to the door of Gunyenji's room and kicked it. His leg was almost crippled, but the custom-made metal door didn't budge. "ALS?" He angrily pulled out his gun and was about to shoot at the door lock. Tina quickly stopped him. "Don't shoot. I have the key here." She didn't think twice before handing over the key that Reinitz had given her. Anyway, when Reinitz left, he didn't say she wasn't allowed to give the key to others. Alice took the key and opened the door with a sullen expression. He kicked it again. This time the door was kicked open. Gunyenji, who had just woken up, quickly wrapped her blanket around herself. She looked up at ALS like he was crazy. ALS was so angry that he wanted to kick her. He was wearing leather boots, and the hard soles were enough to make Gunyenji suffer from cerebral palsy even if she didn't die. Tina was shocked and quickly hugged ALS from behind. She said, "Calm down. Reinitz said she's an important clue. If you beat her up, wouldn't you be disconnected? If something happened to Gunyenji, how would they be able to track the whereabouts of those emails?" ALS had been holding in his anger for 2 days and 1 night. If he didn't vent, he would go crazy. "Let go. I won't hit her. But she must go with me." ALS stomped his feet in anger. He was so strong that Tina almost couldn't hold him anymore. Tina regretted giving ALS the key if she knew this would happen. If she really took Gunyenji away, Reinitz would definitely blame her. "ALS, don't make things difficult for me." Tina became serious. "Think carefully about what Reinitz said." ALS waved his arms and made hissing sounds like a wild beast. Gunyenji's mouth twitched as she watched. How come she didn't realize that ALS was a manic psychopath before? If this kind of person became the head of the Secret Service, the Federal Intelligence Agency would have no future. No wonder a small fry like her could wipe them out. Gunyenji couldn't help but feel proud, but she was still quite scared when she saw ALS go crazy. It was fine to be looked down upon by a crazy person, but it really hurt to be hit by a crazy person. Gunyenji shrunk back into the blanket. After ALS screamed wildly, the depression in his heart finally eased a little. He panted and glared at Gunyenji. The gun in his hand was pointed at her head unknowingly as he gritted his teeth. "Speak. Who the hell did it?" Gunyenji still had a timid and scared expression on her face, but she was very curious. Why didn't Reinitz tell these two that she, Gunyenji, did it? Tina also said that Reinitz only said she was an important clue. Now ALS came to interrogate her about who did it. So Reinitz didn't tell them the truth? Since Reinitz didn't say anything, Gunyenji wouldn't be stupid enough to volunteer that she did it. Although she felt that she couldn't escape death because of Reinitz, she had a glimmer of hope to live. After all, he hadn't sold her out yet, so she wouldn't expose herself. Gunyenji stubbornly turned her head away. Suddenly, all kinds of revolutionary martyrs appeared on her body. She looked like she was saying, "I won't say it, I won't say it, I won't say it even if you beat me to death." ALS became even angrier and suddenly approached Gunyenji. He grabbed her hair and pulled her out of the blanket. Gunyenji slept in the long-sleeved pajamas that Tina gave her. She wasn't afraid of being exposed, but her scalp hurt from being pulled. She quickly tried to pry Al's hand away and said angrily, "Let go. What kind of man are you if you hit a woman? Why would I be talking about morality with a traitorous spy like you?" Alice laughed sinisterly and slapped Gunyenji. The corner of her mouth began to bleed, and half of her face instantly swelled up again. Gunyenji gritted her teeth and didn't make a sound. She didn't want to give ALS the pleasure of torturing her. Alice slapped her, but seeing that she didn't even make a sound, he was even more annoyed. He dragged her out of the small room by her hair and into the bar lobby. Of course there was no one else there. Only Tina was sitting at the bar in her nightgown mixing drinks. She didn't even look at them. Alice took out his handcuffs and cuffed Gunyenji's right hand to a small carved iron railing in the bar lobby. He continued to interrogate her. If you know what's good for you, then tell me now who the pink piggy is and where she is. Otherwise, I have thousands of ways to make you wish you were dead. Gu Nianji's heart sank. She was afraid of pain and being tortured, but what she was even more afraid of was that he didn't torture her to death and instead discovered the secret to her rapid recovery. To her, that would be a more terrifying torture than death. If that was really the case, she might as well provoke ALS and shoot her to death. The sooner she died, the sooner she could be reincarnated. That way she wouldn't have to suffer in bits and pieces. Gu Nianji laughed coldly and said, I'll point out whoever you want me to point out and frame whoever you want me to frame. You're the boss anyway, so you can drag whoever you want into this mess. I'm afraid of pain and I'm afraid that you'll hit me. Tell me, who do you want to make the scapegoat? This lady boss? The bartender or Reinitz? You still dare to sow discord? ALS was so mad at Gu Nianji that he wanted to stomp his feet. See if I don't kill you? He had never seen someone who could still argue with him when he was angry. She must be tired of living. It was the third watch. Today was the third watch. Thank you for your monthly votes yesterday. Reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Moi. Chapter 690. Tina was also shocked by Gu Nianji's words. Not only was she shocked, but she was also a bit flustered. She was no longer as relaxed as when she was mixing drinks at the bar. She walked over with a glass of red wine. With a flick of her wrist, she splashed the entire glass on Gu Nianji's face. She said coldly, people with cheap mouths will be torn apart. Miss Gu, you're so pretty. You don't want that pretty little face of yours to become a smiling man, do you? The Smiling Man was a famous novel by the famous French author Victor Hugo. The male protagonist was a disfigured aristocrat who had been kidnapped at a young age. This kind of disfigurement was when the corners of his mouth were cut open with a knife, all the way to his ears. At first glance he looked like a clown. Even when he cried he looked like he was smiling. Although Gu Nianji had never read the novel, she knew it wasn't something good the moment she heard the title. Also, the red wine that Tina splashed on her face irritated the swollen part of her face from Al's punch. It burned like pepper spray. Gu Nianji thought that if it didn't work, she should just kill herself. It was enough for ALS to go crazy alone. If even Tina went crazy, she should think of the fastest way to die. Gu Nianji's gaze began to wander around the lobby. Finally, it landed on the pistol in Al's hand. If she could provoke ALS to shoot her, then she could die with dignity and comfort. Gu Nianji had already disregarded life and death. Or rather, when she decided to use the Devourer to forward the email instead of erasing all traces of her login, she was already prepared to die. After being with Hua Xiaoheng for so many years, she had been subtly influenced by them in many ways. For example, the habit of constantly being alert to the surroundings, and the open-mindedness and freedom of disregarding life and death. She only regretted that she wouldn't be able to see Hua Xiao one last time before she died. There was also Professor He, especially Professor He. When he went through so much trouble to find her only to see her corpse, wouldn't he be sad? Gu Nianji's wandering gaze made ALS and Tina very angry. Couldn't this girl be more focused? They were torturing a confession here. ALS didn't stop there. He took out the high-voltage electric baton he always carried and pressed it against Gu Nianji's arm. He asked darkly, last chance. Tell me, who did you contact to get them to break into our system? Was he trying to give himself an electric shock? Gu Nianji instantly thought of the electric shock she had received in the blue hole in the Caribbean Sea. She couldn't help but feel disdainful. Could this stun baton be more powerful than the electric fence in the blue hole? That was the high-tech gadget created by her genius father, Gu Xiangguan. Gu Nianji had a nonchalant look on her face, but Al's relentless questioning reminded Tina of something. She cried out in alarm, I think I know who it is. Oh! ALS and Gu Nianji shouted at the same time. ALS saw Gu Nianji's nervous expression and became happy. He quickly said to Tina, who did you think of? ALS, how could you forget? She had sent a video request for help to someone in the Huaxia Empire. It must be that person who contacted her. Tina said excitedly. The surprise on Gu Nianji's face froze. Chi-Chi? Was she talking about Ma Chi-Chi? The more Tina spoke, the happier she became. She used Carl's work phone to send a video for help. It had long been monitored. I'll call Carl right now and ask him to send over his work phone. Carl was the name of the bartender. Gu Nianji's heart sank. She secretly wondered if it would affect Ma Chi-Chi, but then she thought about it. The instant messaging app had hundreds of millions of accounts, and Ma Chi-Chi didn't have her real name verified. What was there for her to be afraid of? Therefore she was calm on the inside but she pretended to be afraid on the outside. She hid under the carved iron railing and didn't dare to look at ALS and Tina. Tina called Carl excitedly and said, "Yes, it's your work phone. Send it over immediately. If I don't see you in 5 minutes, I'll go to your house." In less than 5 minutes, Carl arrived. Just as he was about to open the door to the bar, Tina pushed him out. In the blink of an eye, Wuxiaoheng caught a glimpse of ALS, who had a twisted expression, and Gunyanji. She was handcuffed to a carved iron railing in the lobby, and half her face was red and swollen. Carl was secretly shocked. He passed the phone to Tina and asked hesitantly, "What are you guys doing?" "Nothing." Tina pushed him away without hesitation. "It's none of your business. Go back." Then she turned around and went back in, slamming the door shut. Carl was a newcomer who hadn't been working for long, so he couldn't stand his colleagues' Nazi-like behavior. He silently turned around and got into his car. He took out his personal phone and called Reinitz. "Yes, she's in the bar. ALS and Tina are there. They seem to be torturing Gunyanji." "You mean ALS?" "I clearly told Tina to lock the door." Reinitz was very uneasy. No one knew better than Reinitz what kind of person ALS was. He stood at the window with a dark expression and smoked a cigarette. Finally, he threw the butt away and rushed out of his house. "Still not talking? Then I won't hold back." In the lobby of the bar, ALS turned on the electric baton and pressed it against the fingers of Gunyanji's handcuffed right hand. In the beginning, the voltage wasn't very high. Gunyanji's fingers were only slightly numb, but the pain was like a drizzle to her. But soon ALS kept increasing the voltage, and the pain in Gunyanji's fingers became more and more intense. As the saying went, the fingers were connected to the heart. The pain in the fingers was more unbearable than any other pain. Gunyanji bit her lower lip and tried her best to swallow the scream that was about to escape. She didn't want to give this tormentor any pleasure of achieving his goal. She wasn't brave, but she was stubborn to the point of being stubborn. Tina was holding Carl's phone and had already opened the instant messaging app. She used their surveillance program to find the account and password that Gunyanji had entered before and logged in. Ma Chichi discovered Gunyanji's account as soon as it went online. It was 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday in the Wuxia Empire. Ma Chichi had just woken up and turned on her phone to see that Gunyanji was online. She was overjoyed and quickly sent a message. "Gunyanji? How is it?" "Ah, I'm online." Tina waved the phone at Gunyanji. Gunyanji screamed anxiously, but Ma Chichi didn't turn on the video chat, so she couldn't see or hear anything. Tina coughed and looked at ALS before nodding. Then she turned on the instant messaging app and pointed it in Gunyanji's direction. ALS understood and suddenly increased the voltage on the electric baton. Ah! The high voltage shock caused Gunyanji, who was already very nervous, to finally lose control and scream. Her face was red and swollen, and her expression was distorted. Her scream was like a sharp knife. Separated by the vast ocean and 5,000 miles of time and space, it seemed to jump out from the phone screen and instantly filled Ma Chichi's ears. Ma Chichi was caught off guard. She screamed loudly and threw the phone in her hand. She had grown up in a peaceful country and grew up in a safe environment. The greatest pain she had ever suffered in her life was when her boyfriend cheated on her. When had she ever seen a live scene of being electrocuted and tortured like this? Ma Chichi covered her face and screamed uncontrollably in the dorm room. She was even more miserable than Gunyanji on the other end of the phone. ALS laughed maniacally. The two women's screams and cries of pain finally gave him a hint of sadistic pleasure. The hidden tyranny in his personality reached its peak at that moment. Just as he harbored ill intentions and was about to continue, the door to the bar was kicked open with a bang. Tina saw Reinitz standing at the door with a dark expression and cursed under her breath. She quickly exited the instant messaging app and turned off her phone before stuffing it into her pocket. ALS looked up to see Reinitz arrive, and his lost rationality slowly returned. Gunyanji had already been electrocuted to the point of death. She lay on the ground, gasping for breath. Reinitz walked in step by step and opened his hands at ALS. His voice was as low as the wind from hell. "The key." His gaze was so sharp that ALS looked away uncomfortably. However, he still placed the key to the handcuffs in Reinitz's palm. Reinitz unlocked Gunyanji's handcuffs and carried her horizontally to the bar's main entrance. ALS and Tina looked at each other. They knew what Reinitz was doing was against the rules, but they were intimidated by his intimidating aura and didn't dare say a word. They watched helplessly as Reinitz carried the unconscious Gunyanji out of the bar and carefully placed her in the car. He stroked her sweaty hair before starting the sports car and driving away. Us chased after him and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Reinitz was driving in the direction of the small mansion not far from the bar. Ma Chichi covered her face and cried hysterically in the dorm room. She cried until her eyes were swollen like two small peaches. After venting, her fear and nervousness were finally relieved. However, her legs were so weak that she couldn't stand up. Her phone had been thrown under the desk and she was lying next to the bed. There was an entire dorm room between them, so she couldn't reach it with just her hands. However, she couldn't stand up and walk at the moment. In her panic, she crawled and rolled under the desk to grab her phone. She tried it a few times with trembling hands before finally opening Yin Shixiang's number and anxiously dialing it. Yin Shixiang had been running around to rescue Gun Yanji for the past few days. He accepted that he couldn't inform Hua Xiaoheng, but since he was now in charge of investigating the disappearance of Gun Yanji and the two field agents, he had the authority to use all technical means and human resources. In the end, before he could enter the central control room, it was time for the national election. The Special Operations Forces, which originally couldn't interfere with internal affairs, was entrusted with the important task of supervising the electronic voting and electronic vote counting by the two candidates. The superb central control room of the Special Operations Forces was commandeered just like that. The deputy chief led a dozen technical backbone and loyal subordinates to stay in the central control room for 3 whole days, but Yin Shixiang couldn't even touch the door. This was the first update. Seeing how anxious everyone was, it was still the third update. Although it wasn't 1,800 monthly votes, it was almost there. Let's increase the update in advance. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. The second update was 1,800 monthly votes plus 1 noon, and the third update was 7 p.m. Thanks to Sister Ting 1010 from Chidian for tipping 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Chapter 691. Yin Shixiang had tried many methods in the past 3 days. He was just short of barging in with a gun, but the deputy chief wouldn't let him in no matter what. He said he was worried about leaking information. But without the support and information from the Special Forces Central Control Room, how could he save anyone? He couldn't even confirm the coordinates of the satellite navigation system. Yin Shixiang panicked and made countless reports to Hua Guanchen and General Ji, but the two of them told him not to worry. They even said it didn't matter if they waited for another 2 days. After the results of the election were announced, the special forces would retreat and he, Yin Shixiang, would be able to use the central control room. Yin Shixiang was so anxious that a few strands of his hair turned white, but there was nothing he could do. He even called He Jichu, who wanted to ask if there was any news from them. When he heard that Hua Xiaoheng still didn't know about it, He Jichu hung up without a word. He called again but it didn't go through. Yin Shixiang guessed that He Jichu must have blocked his number. To be honest, Yin Shixiang understood He Jichu very well. He wanted nothing more than to block his own number. He was completely useless. Poor Nianji, he didn't know what she was going through, but he was still running around like a headless fly without a clue. The Special Operations Forces, which were invincible overseas and rarely suffered a defeat, were constrained domestically to the point where their hands and feet were tied. He deeply understood that without Hua Xiao, the Special Forces was not the Special Forces he was familiar with. Yin Shixiang, who had been waiting impatiently for the past 3 days, saw Ma Chichi's number jumping on his phone and answered without hesitation. He used his Bluetooth headset to start the call. "Chichi, is there any news?" Yin Shixiang, who was in the middle of his morning exercise, stopped jogging and slowed down on the tree-lined path. He didn't want his anxious mood to scare Ma Chichi. However, Ma Chichi scared him the moment she spoke. She screamed, "News? I've been talking to you for so long. Why aren't you saving Nianji? It's been 3 days. It's been 3 days. Nianji has been electrocuted. It's so tragic. So scary. I can't take it anymore. Let me scream for a while more." What electric shock? Yin Shixiang's face turned pale. The 1.8-meter-tall man staggered to a stop and trembled on the tree-lined path. He held onto the tree trunk and asked in a trembling voice, "Speak clearly. Is there more news? I'll forward the video to you. See for yourself." Ma Chichi hurriedly saved the instant video and sent it to Yin Shixiang via text. Yin Shixiang received it very quickly and clicked play. The Bluetooth headset was instantly filled with Gun Yanji's screams, and each sound had an extraordinary amplification effect in the headset. The image on the phone wasn't very clear. The phone model seemed to be very old, so the resolution wasn't very high. It was also a little shaky, but it made Gun Yanji's swollen face look even more frightening. Yin Shixiang's body swayed and he fell to the ground on his butt. A man like him found himself crying under the morning sun of October in the imperial capital. The members of the base looked at him in surprise. "What's wrong with Lieutenant Colonel Ian? I'm so sad. Did something happen at home?" A few people who knew him came over to comfort him. "Lieutenant Colonel Ian, let us send you back?" Ian Shixiang wiped his tears and pushed away the people surrounding him to stand up and run. He used all the strength in his body to run like the wind and returned to Hua Xiaoheng's official residence much faster than usual. He immediately changed into his uniform and got into the car with the keys. With a loud bang, he stepped on the accelerator and shot out like an arrow leaving a bow. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to report to General Ji and General Hua and request that Hua Xiao be notified immediately. He knew that Hua Xiao's private plane was about to arrive at the imperial capital's international airport. Yin Shixiang first drove to the military headquarters compound where General Ji lived. However, when he arrived at the door, he was told that General Ji had already left to attend the new Prime Minister Tan Dongbang's first televised speech at the Senate. He left without another word to find Hua Xiaoheng's father, Hua Guanchen. Other than General Ji, only General Hua could make the decision on this matter. Hua Guanchen happened to be at home and saw the sweaty Yin Shixiang. He couldn't help but frown and scold him. "What are you doing? Where's your military discipline? Did you eat all that?" Yin Shixiang was so anxious he couldn't breathe. He could only show his phone to Hua Guanchen and said, "Sir, I hope you can agree to let me inform Hua Xiao immediately. Nianji is already in danger." As he spoke, he played the video Ma Chichi had just sent him. Hua Guanchen frowned as he finished watching the video. He looked up at Yin Shixiang and asked in a low voice, "Where did this video come from?" "Someone sent it to me." "You believed it just because someone sent it to you? What if it's a trap? Did you verify the authenticity of the video?" Hua Guanchen's voice grew sterner. "Look at you. You believed it right away, didn't you? How could you not know that this is the enemy's plot? Lieutenant Colonel Yin, you're Xiaoheng's personal secretary. You're not Gun Yanji's father. You're not going to amount to anything if you're so flustered over such a small matter." Yin Shixiang was scolded by Hua Guanchen and was about to defend himself when Hua Guanchen changed his tone. "I understand now. I'll tell Xiaoheng when he comes back. But remember, you're not allowed to say anything today. Today is the new Prime Minister's big day. Xiaoheng will be attending the Senate's first televised speech as soon as he gets off the plane. If you dare say a word, you'll be punished according to military law." As he spoke, he called an orderly over and instructed, "Follow Lieutenant Colonel Yin and ensure his safety." Hua Guanchen knew very well what Hua Xiaoheng would do if he saw the video. So he couldn't let him see it at this critical juncture. "Yes, Chief." The orderly saluted and followed Yin Shixiang closely. Yin Shixiang's eyes were bloodshot. He panted heavily as he looked at Hua Guanchen, but Hua Guanchen's cold gaze sent a chill down his spine. He closed his eyes and saluted Hua Guanchen. "Yes, Chief. Obey orders. Obey orders." He then said, "Chief, my phone?" Hua Guanchen finally nodded but didn't return the phone. He only said, "Xiaoheng's private plane is about to arrive. How are the security measures at the airport? You're his personal secretary. At this time, you should be in charge of the security at the airport." They sent him to Hua Xiaoheng's side and didn't allow him to say a word to Hua Xiaoheng. They didn't even return his phone. They were forcing him to take a stand. With another orderly following him, Yin Shixiang knew he couldn't act rashly. He had to spread the news, but he wouldn't put himself in danger. If he put himself in danger, there would be one less person who could save Nianji. The members of the Special Operations Forces weren't inflexible, but they were flexible and wouldn't break the relevant laws or challenge the established rules. Yin Shixiang left the courtyard of the military headquarters with a solemn expression. He let the orderly drive while he sat in the back seat and called Ma Chichi. "Chichi? I'm Brother Xiong." Yin Shixiang deliberately spoke slowly, but Ma Chichi still thought it was strange. "Brother Xiong, can we talk properly?" Her voice was still choked with sobs from crying. At that moment, she was applying 2 wet tea bags to her red and swollen eyes. I'm talking properly." Yin Shixiang chuckled and said, "Chichi, I can't help you with what you just said." "What?" Ma Chichi stood up immediately. "Brother Xiong, I didn't expect you to be so heartless." "It's not that I'm heartless." Yin Shixiang spoke to her through his Bluetooth headset and said calmly, "It's just that there are priorities. Hua Xiao is about to return to the Empire. I'm going to the airport to pick him up now." "It's Hua Xiao, Nianji's boyfriend?" Ma Chichi suddenly became nervous. "He's back. That's great. Tell him." However, Yin Shixiang didn't seem to hear what she said and continued, I need to be in charge of airport security. Wuxiao's plane will land in an hour. I'm at the entrance to the VIP area of Flight T3. Yes, sorry, I'm at that entrance. It's easy to see. He hung up. Ma Qiqi was baffled and secretly cursed Yin Shixiang for being unreliable. If she kept relying on him at a time like this, Nianji would probably turn to dust. She felt her heart palpitate and fidget when she thought about the situation in the video she had just seen. In a moment of frustration, she turned on the TV in the living room as a backdrop and wandered around the living room, thinking of who else she could ask for help. Just then, the melodious sound of a violin came from the TV. Ma Qiqi glanced at it and saw that the TV was broadcasting a documentary about the new Prime Minister, Tan Dongbang's family. She couldn't help but pout. She thought to herself that this TV station was really quick to suck up to the people. They had been slandering the Tan family before, but the election had just ended yesterday, and today the wind had already turned. However, she didn't want to watch the Tan family, so she impatiently took the remote control and changed the channel. She didn't expect the same documentary to be playing on the other channel. Ma Qiqi wasn't satisfied and changed the channel again, but it was still a documentary about the Tan family. She changed all the channels within a minute, and every channel was actually showing the documentary about the new Prime Minister's family. Recording. Film. This was like the Spring Festival Gala. Was this forced brainwashing? Ma Qiqi snorted and threw the remote control away. She hugged her little pillow as she sat on the sofa, still thinking about Yin Shixiang's strange words. She felt like she had missed out on some incredible news. On the TV, they were introducing the new Prime Minister, Tan Dongbang's only daughter, Tan Guiran. They praised her as a flower, saying that she was talented and beautiful, a musical prodigy, and that she had held a solo concert at the Carnegie Mellon Golden Music Hall in America at the age of 15. This made Ma Qiqi even more annoyed and she rolled her eyes countless times. Just as she was about to turn off the TV, the image suddenly changed to a short video of Tan Guiran boarding a plane in America. It was obviously recorded when she boarded the plane 10 hours ago. The narrator's voice was very gentle. Major General Hua Xiaoheng, Deputy Secretary General of the Military Supreme Council, personally took a private plane to America to welcome Miss Tan Guiran back. The plane is about to land at Terminal T3 of the Imperial Capital International Airport. Let's connect with our colleagues at Terminal T3 to see what's going on there. This was the second monthly pass of 1800 plus an advance pass. Today was the third watch. Thank you, dear friends, for your monthly passes yesterday. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Third watch at 7 p.m. Moi. Chapter 692. As the camera switched, the large screen showed the tall and magnificent view of Terminal T3 of the Imperial Capital International Airport. Ma Qiqi stood up immediately. She had caught a glimpse of the handsome back of a tall man in a military uniform in the short video. He looked very familiar. It had to be Gu Nianji's boyfriend, Hua Xiao. Ma Qiqi finally knew that Hua Xiao was actually the Deputy Secretary General of the Supreme Military Council. Ma Qiqi, who had never paid attention to political news, cried. Oh my, how high was that position? Nianji was finally saved. Although Ma Qiqi had seen Hua Xiaoheng before, she never knew what he did. She only knew he was in the military and had a high rank, but Gu Nianji had never said what he did. Ma Qiqi had never asked Gu Nianji either. She wasn't a fan of gossip, so she never asked if he didn't say. It was from Yin Shixiang's words, combined with the introduction on TV, that she realized Gu Nianji's boyfriend was actually so powerful. No, I have to hurry to the airport to stop him. Otherwise, it'll be harder to see him when he comes back. Ma Qiqi thought about it as she combed her hair haphazardly. Picking up her phone and small backpack, she quickly rushed down the dorm building and out of the school gate to hail a taxi. She sped to Imperial Capital International Airport. She was lucky today. The taxi went smoothly and there was almost no traffic. It only took 45 minutes to arrive at Terminal T3 of the Imperial Capital International Airport. It usually took an hour and a half before. She stood at the entrance of the terminal and looked up at the blue sky. A large military plane that looked like a white swan was slowly descending from the white clouds. Of course, the airport was filled with plainclothes police, Secret Service agents, and fully armed soldiers. Ma Qiqi wandered around the airport for a while and found that many places were tightly blocked. She couldn't get in at all. How could this be? Holding her phone, she stood at the entrance of Terminal T3 in a daze as she watched the people coming and going. Everyone was beaming with joy, but Ma Qiqi's heart was as cold as the dead of winter, bone-chilling. How could these people laugh so happily? Did they know that an innocent little girl was being tortured in a foreign country? How could they laugh? How could he laugh? Machichi glared at these people with all her might. Suddenly, a black Rolls-Royce limousine stopped in front of the terminal not far from her. The attendant wearing white gloves got out of the car first and opened the door attentively. A graceful and elegant lady got out of the car and looked at the tall terminal in front of her smugly. Then a group of people got out of the cars behind her and surrounded her as they walked into the terminal. Machichi's eyes widened. Wasn't this Tan Dongbang's wife, Kai Song-in, whom she had just seen on TV? The new Prime Minister's wife. What was she doing here? Machichi rolled her eyes and immediately remembered that Huashao was using his private jet to bring the new Prime Minister's daughter, Tan Guirin, back to the Hua Empire. No wonder Tan Guirin's mother had come as well. So what if you have parents? Oh. Machichi pursed her lips, feeling sad and nervous. Her eyes followed the backs of the group of people and saw them enter the VIP passage of Terminal 3. Why did this place sound so familiar? Machichi looked around and finally remembered that this was the place Yin Shixiang had told her about over the phone. He said he was going to be in charge of airport security here. As if she had been enlightened, Machichi suddenly understood. She finally understood what Yin Shixiang meant with his strange words. Machichi ran after them. Seeing that the group of people had entered the VIP passage, she quickly walked over as well. Miss, this is the special VIP passage of the terminal. May I ask if you have a special pass? A soldier carrying a gun walked over to stop her. The people in charge of security in the VIP passage of Terminal 3 were not airport security personnel. They were all armed soldiers. It was obvious that the security measures here were several levels higher than other places. Machichi looked at the soldier in shock and stammered, I saw the people in front go in. I thought, may I ask if you came with Mrs. Tan and the others? The soldier asked politely. His attitude toward her was considered amiable. Machichi wanted to say yes, but she was too embarrassed to lie. As she was struggling, she saw Yin Shixiang walk over from the corner of her eye. Just as she was about to call out to him, Yin Shixiang acted like he didn't know her and said to the soldier, Go over there and watch. It seems like there are a few people passing by. Yes, sir. The soldier quickly carried his gun and left. Only Yin Shixiang and Machichi were left in front of the VIP passage. There were a few other soldiers, but they were different from the soldier just now. They carried guns and wore helmets. They didn't move at all and were like wax figures. It was like they were part of the background. They didn't have the freedom to move and only listen to Yin Shixiang's orders. They were all Yin Shixiang's direct subordinates and absolutely obeyed him. Yin Shixiang didn't look at Machichi. He walked to a ventilated area and lit a cigarette. Looking at the blue sky and white clouds outside the window, he said calmly, Hurry up and go. Machichi froze for a moment, then understood. She lowered her head and ran in quickly, following Tan Guirin's mother, Kai Song-in, and the others. The security personnel in the VIP passage were agents from the Secret Service. They didn't recognize Machichi, but seeing that she had come from the VIP passage with the strictest security and was going in the direction of the First Lady's group, they thought she was with the First Lady. Plus, Machichi was well-dressed and seemed to be of the same social class as the new Prime Minister's family, so they didn't stop her for questioning. Machichi's luck was off the charts today. She followed the First Lady's group all the way to the swan-like military plane that had just landed. The cabin door hadn't opened yet, and the ladder had just descended. A large red carpet was spread from the cabin door to the ground. The wife of the new Prime Minister, Kai Song-in, stood on the red carpet and looked at the cabin door excitedly. Machichi also held her breath and quietly stood behind the group of people. She was tall, so she could see through the crowd and clearly see what was going on the ladder. At that moment, the snow-white cabin door opened, and a beautiful woman in a pink dress stood at the cabin door. She smiled and waved at the people below. This must be the new Prime Minister's daughter, Tan Guirin. Machichi couldn't help but pout again. She thought to herself, You're just the Prime Minister's daughter, not the Prime Minister himself. Why are you acting like a leader? Have you asked the entire nation? She rolled her eyes more today than she had in the past 20 years. Her eyelids were about to cramp. Before she could finish rolling her eyes, she saw a tall and handsome man in a military uniform appear not far behind Tan Guirin. The man wore a huge pair of sunglasses that covered half his face. Tan Guirin turned slightly and said something to the man behind her. Then the man nodded slightly. A shy smile appeared on Tan Guirin's face. She lowered her head and held onto the railing of the ladder as she carefully walked down. Kai Songyin stood on the red carpet not far from the bottom of the ladder. She looked at her daughter with a smile, as well as the young major general behind her who had a bright future ahead of him. She felt extraordinarily satisfied. Her husband was noble and her daughter was intelligent. All she needed was a capable son-in-law. Then she could be considered a winner in life. Tan Guirin, who was holding onto the railing as she walked down the ladder, was actually very nervous. She wasn't as calm as she looked. She had been well protected since she was young and had truly grown up in an ivory tower. However, she knew that it was being broadcasted live on television, so she tried her best to put on the most correct posture and the most noble etiquette to walk down the ladder like a princess. The red carpet extended all the way like it was the future of her beautiful life. It was so red that she couldn't see the end of it. However, the red carpet was like blood in Ma Qiqi's eyes. Her eyes were red. At that moment, Tan Guirin, who was walking down the ladder, suddenly swayed. It was as if she had stepped on air and sprained her ankle. Hua Xiaoheng casually caught her arm and only gave it a light support before letting her go. Ma Qiqi was speechless. Kai Songyin's smile became even more benevolent. Tan Guirin's face immediately turned red. It complemented her pink dress suit and added even more color to it. At that moment, all the shut-ins watching the live broadcast were stunned. They couldn't help but post online that Tan Guirin, the only daughter of the new prime minister, was the newest shut-in goddess. Finally, Tan Guirin and Hua Xiaoheng both walked down the ladder. A 7- or 8-year-old girl in a snow-white princess dress walked up to Tan Guirin with a bouquet of flowers. Tan Guirin happily accepted it and patted the girl's head. She loved children the most. She casually stuffed the bouquet into Hua Xiaoheng's hand and bent down to kiss the girl's cheek. Ma Qiqi hadn't expected this. Her hands clenched into fists, and her entire body couldn't stop trembling. She had never experienced something like this. Her emotions went from waiting excitedly to being stunned and at a loss. Now she couldn't take it anymore. Her brain heated up, she took a few steps forward and bypassed the crowd to stand alone at the edge of the red carpet. Pointing in Hua Xiaoheng's direction, she shouted as loudly as she could, "Hua Xiao! Your girlfriend was kidnapped and tortured with electrocution. How can you still be in the mood to protect her? Nianji must be blind. You scumbag. You'll get what you deserve." It was the third update. Today was the third update, and the monthly votes had been increased by 1,800. Thank you, dear readers, for your monthly votes yesterday. The scumbag author was scared to death by everyone, but she still had to bravely remind everyone of her recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 693. Ma Qiqi was stunned after cursing in one breath. She was clearly there to ask for help from Nianji. How did it become hatred? She wanted to die so badly. What if Hua Xiao got angry and didn't save Nianji? Ma Qiqi opened her mouth again, but when she saw Hua Xiaoheng's cold and stern gaze, her earlier anger instantly dissipated. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Most of the people present were dumbstruck and couldn't react for a moment. The room had been full of laughter a moment ago, but now it was completely silent. It was as if Ma Qiqi's clear voice was still echoing in everyone's ears. The director of the TV station was the first to react and immediately cut off the live broadcast. Actually, their live broadcast wasn't a real live broadcast. It was delayed by 5 minutes to facilitate immediate censorship and to deal with unexpected situations like this. Therefore, the clip of Ma Qiqi scolding Hua Xiao wasn't broadcast at all. Other than the people present, no other TV viewers saw this scene. Gu Nianji, who was taken away by Reinitz, found herself back in the small villa she used to live in. She sneered internally, but her body was exhausted. Reinitz placed her on the chaise longue she used to curl up in. Reinitz brought her milk, cake, and her favorite white sausage and bread. He placed them on the small coffee table in front of her, but she didn't want to eat them at all. She turned to look out the window, her stubborn expression giving Reinitz a headache. He didn't know how to comfort her, and it was awkward for the two of them to not talk in the room. He brought his laptop over and searched for Huaxia Empire videos for her to watch. He randomly clicked on the most popular video on Huaxia Empire social media. Gu Nianji saw Hua Xiaoheng in the title of the video and was immediately captivated. She couldn't help watching it. Seeing that she was interested in something, Reinitz finally sighed in relief. He walked to the window and leaned against the windowsill to study Gu Nianji with narrowed eyes. Gu Nianji quietly watched the video and slowly straightened. Her expression went from excitement to paleness and emptiness. It was as if she had instantly gone from the height of summer to the depths of winter. The high-definition screen on the laptop showed the scene of Hua Xiaoheng and Tan Guiren walking down the plane stairs together. She watched him get off the plane, watched him listen to what others were saying, watched him smile, watched him help the Prime Minister's daughter, who almost sprained her ankle, and watched cute children send flowers to welcome the couple. As for him, he casually accepted the bouquet from the Prime Minister's daughter. It was so natural and casual, as though he had done it thousands of times before. In Gu Nianji's eyes, there was a strange tacit understanding between them. Gu Nianji smiled as she read. She didn't realize she was crying until there was a small pool of water on the keyboard. She wiped her tears and continued to smile at the computer. Her big black pupils were like the dark night that had been washed by the rain. They were crystal clear, but there was no end to them. Reinitz had been watching her from the window. He watched her smile and cry. It was like watching a flower that hadn't bloomed to its fullest, but had already bloomed to its fullest. Gu Nianji's hopeless smile hurt him. He was about to speak when he suddenly heard the rumbling of a car outside the window, followed by the sound of orderly footsteps coming from all directions. Then he heard a cold and indifferent voice coming from outside the window. It was standard Hanoverian German. Reinitz, you have 8 people here. We've already locked on to their positions. Don't worry, we all have armor-piercing bullets. We can guarantee a headshot through the wall. If you know what's good for you, put down your weapons, line up at the door and crouch down with your hands on your head. I'll count to 3. If you don't leave, I won't be polite. I'll warn you again. Do not touch Nianji. If any of you take a step in her direction, I promise you'll immediately be covered in blood. You can try if you don't believe me. Yijichu's voice came from outside the window. Gu Nianji didn't know what device he was using to transmit the message, but his voice was so clear it sounded like it was right beside her ear. But Gu Nianji didn't move. She was like a clay statue. She didn't hear him at all. Reinitz sighed and looked down to see a small red dot where his heart was. He knew it was the laser guidance system's location. Yijichu was even using such a weapon. They really couldn't fight him head-on. He shook his head and said into his Bluetooth headset, "Retreat." Then his people walked out of the small villa. They threw their weapons out the window and walked out the door with their hands on their heads. They saw Yijichu and dozens of masked men with heavy weapons standing in the open space outside the door. There were several cars behind him. They were obviously bulletproof and as sturdy as armored vehicles. They were going to war. Reinitz didn't start a fight with him. Instead, he looked at him silently and reached out to point at him. Then he turned around and squatted down with his men with their hands on their heads. A masked man walked up and pointed a gun at Reinitz and his men. He stared at them and didn't let them move. Yijichu was the first to rush into Reinitz's small villa. As soon as he entered, he saw a skinny girl sitting dazedly on a chaise lounge in a small, warmly decorated living room. There was a laptop in front of her, and her eyes were fixed on the laptop as if she wanted to see through the screen. Yijichu's heart ached. He quickly walked over and hugged Gu Nianji. "Nianji, I'll take you home." Gu Nianji's eyes were blank. She slowly looked up and saw the person standing in front of her. Yijichu. Her dark eyes shifted and large tears finally flowed out. Gu Nianji buried her head in his arms. Gu Nianji buried her head in his chest. At first she only cried quietly, but her whole body gradually trembled, then sobbed and finally wailed. Her cries were so painful that even the expressionless mercenaries, who were used to licking blood and killing as a profession, couldn't bear it and looked away one by one. Yijichu hugged her tightly and kept stroking her back to comfort her. She cried until she almost fainted. "Professor I'm so sad. I'm so sad. It's even worse than when they hit me and electrocuted me. I'm being tortured here and he's beside another woman. He even helps her sprain her ankle. I can't stand it. I really can't stand it. I know it's not his fault. I know he definitely doesn't know what happened to me, but I still feel bad. I still blame him. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm not that great. I'm selfish. I'm petty. I'm not presentable. I don't care about the big picture. I don't have a father or a mother. I'm not a Miss Perfect. I'm just a little beggar who was picked up. I shouldn't have wishful thinking. I don't deserve to be with him. I reap what I sow. I deserve it. I deserve it. I deserve it." She said "I deserve it" 3 times in a row. Her whole body was convulsing from crying, and she was on the verge of breaking down. Yijichu felt like a knife was being twisted in his heart, and tears rolled down his cheeks. "Nianji, you're not. It's my fault. Come home with me. I'll take you home," Gu Nianji cried until she fainted. Yijichu carried her out of Reinitz's villa and quickly got into the car. Reinitz and his men were temporarily tied up there, so Hijichu didn't have much time to retreat. Hijichu used all his connections and bribed them with astronomical prices to find Reinitz's stronghold and successfully rescue Gunyenji. They rushed and finally boarded their private plane before Reinitz and his men were rescued. They flew out of German airspace. On the tarmac in front of Terminal T3 in the Wuxia Empire's imperial capital, a sudden accident happened. The bodyguards of the new First Lady, Kai Songyin, turned pale with fright as soon as Machichi screamed. A few burly men immediately rushed over and hugged Machichi from behind to cover her mouth. Two other people held her on both sides and one of them slapped her face several times. Machichi had never been hit like this in her entire life, and the person's hand was heavy. She was stunned immediately, and her cute round face immediately swelled up as tears fell uncontrollably. She didn't want to cry in front of so many people, but it really hurt. In that instant she could only think of when Gunyenji was electrocuted. It must have been 1,000 times more painful than what she was feeling right now. Machichi began to cry even more sadly. However, the bodyguards didn't care whether she lived or died. They frantically covered her mouth and only wanted to drag her away immediately. Tan Guiran was furious when she saw this. She had never been used to seeing others bully the weak, let alone slapping an innocent girl in front of her. Let her go. Let her go. Tan Guiran quickly walked over and pointed at the bodyguards. She said sternly, "Let her go right now. In broad daylight, is there still any law?" The bodyguards froze and couldn't help but look at Tan Guiran's mother, Kai Songyin. Kai Songyin gave them a look and they finally let go. Tan Guiran quickly hugged Machichi and took out a handkerchief to wipe her tears. She said, "Don't be afraid. No one will dare to hit you again." Machichi pushed her away and said angrily, "Who wants you to pretend to be nice? Go away. Don't touch me." Tan Guiran took a few steps back in shock and looked at her mother, Kai Songyin, at a loss. Then she looked at Hua Xiaoheng behind her. Hua Xiaoheng's expression was normal and she couldn't tell what he was thinking. However, his deep eyes carried a heavy sense of pressure. Even Tan Guiran didn't dare to look at him for too long. One look was enough to scare her and she quickly looked away. Kai Songyin didn't say anything and only pulled on Tan Guiran's hand to indicate that she shouldn't be nosy. Kai Songyin's bodyguards surrounded Machichi again and grabbed her arms from both sides. Another person gagged her mouth. At that moment Yin Shixiang caught up from behind. His hand was like a knife as he quickly snatched Machichi from the hands of the bodyguards. Then he coldly warned the First Lady, Kai Songyin, who was smiling as she watched from the side. "Mrs. Tan, your husband hasn't officially taken office yet, but your bodyguards have already severely injured our citizen. I think many people will be very interested in this piece of news." Kai Songyin smiled and said casually, "If they're interested, then they'll be interested. They rely on this to make a living, so we can't ruin their livelihood, right?" She wasn't at all worried about how the media would write about their family. At that moment, the Secret Service security guards who were maintaining order at the airport also rushed over. They pointed at Machichi and said to Yin Shixiang, "This person trespassed on the restricted area of the airport and may have broken the law. Please hand her over to us." Of course Yin Shixiang didn't want to, but he could handle Kai Songyin's bodyguards alone, but he couldn't handle the elite Secret Service agents who were also soldiers. Soon Machichi was taken over by the Secret Service. One person grabbed Machichi's arm and clamped it behind her back. Another female agent took out handcuffs and was about to put them on Machichi. Hua Xiaoheng had been silent on the side, but his brows gradually furrowed. It wasn't until he saw Yin Shixiang appear that his brows couldn't help twitching. His heart sank. Machichi's words couldn't have been baseless. Something had really happened to Nianji. He didn't believe it at first. How could he not know something had happened to Nianji with the strict security measures he had put in place? At first he thought Machichi was making a mountain out of a molehill. After all, she was only a student who had always been in school. Perhaps she would cry for 3 days if her boyfriend cheated on her. But now even Yin Shixiang was helping her. It seemed like this was no small matter. Hua Xiaoheng threw away the flowers in his hand and strode over to Machichi. He stood in front of her with his hands behind his back and said dryly to the Secret Service agent, "Let her go." The Secret Service agent in charge of security refused. Moreover, they were now part of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and not under the jurisdiction of the military. Therefore he could only say, "Chief, please don't make it difficult for us." Hua Xiaoheng didn't wait for him to finish. He pulled out his gun without hesitation and pressed it against the man's chest. "Are you going to let her go or not?" "Gun? He's going to shoot." The people present immediately screamed hysterically and began to push and shove as they ran in all directions. Fortunately, the director of the TV station had already cut off the live broadcast. At that moment, even the cameras were about to be smashed. They hurriedly led their reporters and cameramen to hide inside the terminal. However, the entrance to the terminal was blocked by a group of armed soldiers. It was the people Yin Shixiang had brought. All of them had their guns loaded and pointed outwards at the people who wanted to enter. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes narrowed slightly. His finger lightly tapped the trigger and the gun made a light click. The Secret Service agent who had clamped Ma Qiqi's hands behind her back immediately let go. Yin Shixiang quickly half-supported and half-hugged Ma Qiqi. Zhao Liangzi had just gotten off the plane. Seeing the chaos, he quickly ran over and asked, "What happened?" Yin Shixiang said anxiously, "I'll tell you in the car. I brought everything." Hua Xiaoheng strode towards the terminal door. Yin Shixiang held Ma Qiqi's hand. "You come with us." Ma Qiqi's face was streaked with tears. She choked out, "Are you still going to save Nianji?" "Of course," Yin Shixiang said without hesitation. He took her hand and walked quickly behind Hua Xiaoheng. Zhao Liangzi finally understood that something had happened to Gu Nianji. He immediately said to Yin Shixiang, "Big Xiong, did you bring your phone?" "I didn't bring my work phone, so I can't connect to the system." He wanted to immediately connect to the Special Operations Forces Central Control System so that he could activate the satellite tracking system to locate Gu Nianji. Yin Shixiang's face darkened. He shook his head and said, "The system in the car can be used. You can use that." Zhao Liangzi knew something was wrong. Something big must have happened. His expression also became serious. This was the first chapter of the 4,000-word chapter. Seeing how anxious everyone was, he didn't separate it into 2 installments. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. There won't be any more chapters today. But do we still need to update at 7 p.m.? Thank you to PPL from Chidian for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Out of so many people who had sent razor blades, only this girl had generously tipped them. The scumbag author was so moved that tears welled up in his eyes. Chapter 694. Hua Xiaoheng left the T3 terminal with a cold expression. He completely ignored the guest who had come with Kai Songyin to welcome Tang Guoren. When he walked out of the Imperial Capital International Airport, the Special Operations Forces vehicle that Yin Shixiang had brought was already waiting. 3 or 4 military vehicles surrounded Hua Xiaoheng's car tightly. Other normal vehicles couldn't get close at all and could only stop and watch from a distance. Kai Songyin's personal assistant said awkwardly, "Madam, is Major General Hua still going to the Senate?" They had agreed to bring Tan Guoren and Hua Xiaoheng to the Senate to attend Tan Dongbang's first televised speech since being elected Prime Minister. Therefore, Kai Songyin had specially contacted her friends in the media world to carefully organize this small welcoming ceremony. But this had happened in the end. Although Kai Songyin felt uncomfortable, she still kept a smile on her face. "Of course it's fine. We'll go first and let General Ji know when we get there." Would he dare not go if General Ji asked Hua Xiaoheng to go? Only Tang Guoren was very uneasy. After a moment of silence, she said, "Mommy, Mr. Hua still has things to do. Let's go ourselves. Don't make things difficult for him." TSK, you're being virtuous now? Girls are really attracted to their husbands. Kai Songyin was very happy. How could she not be happy that her precious daughter was finally enlightened? Tan Guoren forced a smile and said, "Mommy, he already has a girlfriend. Don't say anything more." "Ah, who said he has a girlfriend? A girlfriend that the family doesn't acknowledge is just a female friend. Don't you understand that? Alright, let's not talk about this. Let's go see your father. He misses you so much." Kai Songyin held Tan Guoren's hand and walked to the terminal door. Hua Xiaoheng bowed and got into the car. He sat in the middle seat in the back with Yin Shixiang beside him. Ma Qiqi didn't sit in the same car as them. Instead, she got into the car behind and sat with a female Special Operations Forces colleague. Zhao Liangzi sat in the front passenger seat. There was a full car communication system there that could be connected to the central control room. Fan Jian immediately started the car and sped towards the Special Operations Forces. Hua Xiaoheng only gave him 30 minutes. He would have to ride a roller coaster to complete the task. Yin Shixiang began explaining Gu Nianji's situation as soon as he got into the car. By the time I received the news and was summoned back to the Empire, Nianji had already been missing for more than 10 days. He continued, "However, Professor, he is actively searching for her in Germany. We can work with him." Hua Xiaoheng's face was expressionless, but the corners of his eyes kept twitching, showing that he was furious. However, he was used to not showing his emotions, so not many people could understand his anger. You're saying that we only received news of Nianji's accident more than 10 days after it happened? Give me the duty list. Who was with Nianji when she disappeared? Hua Xiaoheng deliberately ignored the conversation about Hijichu. His voice was low and gentle. It sounded very pleasing to the ear, but it carried an incomparably heavy pressure. Yin Shixiang's forehead was covered in sweat. No one followed us, he stammered. Hua Xiaoheng's gaze swept over. His jaw tightened and his lips pressed into a thin line. No one? Looks like someone wants to be shot. Narrowing his eyes, Hua Xiaoheng's voice seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It carried the aura of death. Nianji's security level is Special A, the same as General Ji and Speaker Long. It's one level higher than the Prime Minister. Tell me, who had the ability to make her disappear for more than 10 days before receiving news? Not only was Yin Shixiang's entire body trembling, but his voice was also shaking. Not long after you left the country for the mission, Nianji's security level was completely revoked. So when she left the country, she was just a normal citizen. There was no one following her 24/7, and no one checking her GPS 24/7. Hua Xiaoheng suddenly raised his head. His eyes were like lightning as he looked at Yin Shixiang. He chuckled softly and clenched his fists. In that instant, Hua Xiaoheng thought about how his mission had almost failed because of the traitor's betrayal. He had no choice but to stay abroad for a few months. If he hadn't been quick to react and had more trump cards than others, he would have definitely fallen this time. Once he fell, Nianji would have no one to protect her. She could only be a piece of meat on someone else's chopping board. Looks like it was a series of plans. Hua Xiaoheng slowly leaned against the back of the car, but his body did not relax. His voice gradually became icy. Revoke? Who agreed to it? Who executed it? Big Xiong, don't tell me you don't know anything. Yin Shixiang trembled so hard he almost jumped out of his seat. He quickly said, reporting to Chief. The list of names has been verified. We await your punishment. Although he had not been able to track down Nianji's whereabouts for various reasons these past few days, he had done a lot of work. He had investigated all the suspicious points that Hua Xiaoheng had raised. He had also compiled a list of the people responsible. Hua Xiaoheng expressionlessly looked out the window at the passing streets. He said dryly, then what are we waiting for? Arrest her immediately. What? Yin Shixiang was stunned. Arrest her? But, the people who proposed the revocation and executed it were all the military Supreme Council. Most people did not have the rank to make such a decision. Hua Xiaoheng crossed his arms and closed his eyes. The corners of his mouth twitched. I really can't wait. Of course he could not arrest someone of her rank. But was he going to let her go just like that? That was wishful thinking. Give me the list. Hua Xiaoheng opened his hands to Yin Shixiang. Yin Shixiang took out an electronic notebook and placed it in Hua Xiaoheng's hands with both hands. Hua Xiaoheng looked through them one by one. The Standing Committee of the Military Supreme Council only had 7 people, but the entire Supreme Council had more than 50 people. There were a total of 3 people who proposed the revocation of Gu Nianji's security rank and executed it. They were all from the Supreme Council. Of course, they were not members of the Standing Committee. However, the proposal by these 3 people was also approved by a majority vote. The specific reason was that they believed that Gu Nianji's father, Gu Xiangwen, had already been found and was under military protection. This special A-rank protection should be given to Gu Xiangwen, not Gu Nianji. Back then, Gu Nianji had also been entrusted to Hua Xiaoheng's custody by the military, so they indeed had full jurisdiction over Gu Nianji. However, even though they had full jurisdiction, they purposely bypassed Hua Xiaoheng, who was the specific guardian. That was interesting. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the list expressionlessly and wrote a few words before passing it to Zhao Liangzi. Reported to General Ji. Just say that I received a report from abroad that these people are traitors. Please ask the military police to investigate them and prove their innocence. Zhao Liangzi was speechless. Sir, can you not be so blatant in your revenge? Zhao Liangzi was speechless. Yin Shixiang was speechless. Sir, it would be perfect if you didn't say the word innocence through gritted teeth. At that moment, Zhao Liangzi's car phone rang. He looked at it and saw it was from the car behind him. Zhao Liangzi picked up. What is it? Ma Qiqi's anxious voice came from the phone. Is Brother Xiong there? I want to ask you, where are you going? Nianji was beaten. She was electrocuted. Why aren't you going to save her? What nonsense are you talking about? Electrocuted? Hua Xiaoheng looked in the direction of the car phone. How did you know? I have the video on my phone. Those bad guys sent it to me. Ma Qiqi was frightened by Hua Xiaoheng's tone. She shrank her neck and raised her phone timidly. Our brother Xiong has it too. I forwarded it to him. Hua Xiaoheng looked at Yin Shixiang, but before he could ask, Yin Shixiang had already raised his hand and said quickly, My phone was confiscated. General Hua confiscated it. The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's mouth twitched. He simply said, Stop the car. Hua Xiaoheng's car screeched to a stop on the shoulder of the highway. Ma Qiqi's phone was quickly delivered to Hua Xiaoheng. The car started again. Hua Xiaoheng pressed play and Gu Nianji's screams rang out in the car. The veins on the back of Hua Xiaoheng's hand popped as he gripped the phone. Gu Nianji's beautiful face wasn't very clear on the 5-inch phone screen, but he could see that her face was swollen and badly deformed. However, she looked at the camera anxiously and not fearfully. She was worried. What was she worried about? Hua Xiaoheng's fingers slowly moved to the phone screen. He wanted to caress her deformed face, but as soon as he touched the phone screen, he immediately retracted as if he had been electrocuted. It was as if he was afraid that if he used too much force she would be in pain. Yes, she would be in pain. It would be very painful. When she was by his side, she would act coquettishly in front of him for half a day even if she was pricked by a needle. He was busy with work and usually ignored her coquettishness. However, as long as he occasionally had the time to touch her head, she would smile happily like a blooming flower. She was so dazzling that he couldn't look away. However, he also remembered that last time in the blue hole, Nianji had almost been paralyzed by the electric shock. However, she had acted as if she didn't feel any pain in front of him. He didn't know when it started, but she had even been hiding her pain from him? She only wanted to show her best side in front of him. This Gu Nianji made his heart ache even more than when she liked to act coquettishly in the past. And he knew better than anyone how timid she was. When she first started working for him, she would often be awakened by nightmares at night. However, she didn't dare to disturb him, so she quietly hugged the small quilt and slept in front of his study. One night he worked overtime until midnight. When he pushed the door open, he saw the tiny Gu Nianji curled up in front of the study, sleeping soundly. Only then did he know how insecure she was. From then on, no matter how busy he was, he would accompany her at night. He would accompany her when she woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night. He believed that as long as he was the first person she saw when she woke up from nightmares, she would no longer be afraid. Now her nightmares had come again. Who would she see when she opened her eyes? His heart felt like it had been cut open again and then soaked in salt water. The pain was numbing. However, when he saw the same name written on every crack in his heart, he realized that she had become an existence in his life that he couldn't let go of. He would never retreat from her. He would never let go. It was the second night watch. Dear friends, you can get the third night watch with 2,100 monthly votes. Good night, everyone. Chapter 695. Hua Xiaoheng quietly stared at Ma Qiqi's phone, his expression unchanging. Even Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi couldn't see any difference. Only he knew. His entire body was so stiff that he couldn't even breathe properly. He gripped the phone with one hand, his gaze so intense it seemed like he wanted to burn a hole in the phone's screen. After watching for a while, he finally played the video from Ma Qiqi's phone and saved it to his own phone. He then passed Ma Qiqi's phone to Zhao Liangzi. Delete all the videos of Nianji. If she has a cloud account, delete them as well. Zhao Liangzi silently took the phone and checked it with the software. He then physically deleted both of Gu Nianji's videos. There's no cloud storage account. Only the phone has the storage. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and said to the driver, Fan Jian, stop the car and tell the people in the back to take Miss Ma Qiqi back. The car screeched to a stop on the side of the road again. Yin Shixiang got out of the car and returned the phone to Ma Qiqi. Thank you for your hard work today. He added, don't worry. You won't be beaten for nothing. Ma Qiqi shook her head furiously. I'm fine, but you guys will save Nianji. Isn't that right? She looked at Yin Shixiang expectantly, her red and swollen face filled with fervent anticipation and desire. Yin Shixiang's heart skipped a beat. He looked away and nodded. Yes, but this is a secret operation, so it's not convenient for you to be here. That's good. That's good. Don't worry about me. Go back now. Go back now. Ma Qiqi quickly pushed Yin Shixiang into the car. Don't drive me. I'll call a car myself. You guys go save Nianji. I'll be fine even if I walk back. Of course they wouldn't let her walk back. Yin Shixiang said to the female colleague in the car, "Please take her back to B University." The female colleague nodded to reassure him. Yin Shixiang returned to the car and sped to the Special Operations Forces headquarters with Hu Xiaoheng and the others. Ma Qiqi picked up her phone and sighed emotionally. Just as she was about to check the news, she suddenly realized someone had pinched her phone with 5 finger marks. Damn! Whose hand strength was that? Her phone had been deformed. This was the hardest sapphire phone screen. Hu Xiaoheng closed his eyes and tried his best to suppress the anxiety in his heart. He asked Zhao Liangzi, "Have you found Nianji's location? Don't tell me they took back her GPS." Although no one was monitoring Gu Nianji's GPS 24 hours a day, the receiver was still on her, so her location could be found in minutes. Zhao Liangzi abruptly turned his head from the front seat and stammered. "Hu Xiao, I haven't checked yet, but I'm afraid it's too late." "What's wrong?" Yin Shixiang panicked. "Little Zay, what did you find?" Hu Xiaoheng opened his eyes and said calmly, "Speak." Zhao Liangzi reported to Hu Xiaoheng with a dreamy, pained and guilty expression. "Hu Xiao, those people won't let Nianji go. She hacked into the Gestapo's intelligence system and sent all the documents, really all the documents, encrypted and sent them to our email." "Hu Xiao, it's too late." "What encrypted file?" Yin Shixiang didn't understand and was very anxious. "Little Zay, can't you speak properly? Speak human language. We've already been delayed for a long time." Zhao Liangzi passed the information he found to the back seat. "I created all these emails. I told Nianji about it and demonstrated it when I taught her how to be a hacker. As soon as I logged into our system just now, I received countless notifications from these emails. My inbox almost exploded." Zhao Liangzi's expression was unnatural. His eyes stared blankly. So many documents. From the number and scale, it's almost the entire German Federal Intelligence Agency's system. All the documents, encrypted and unencrypted, system files, notebooks, data forms. This kind of thing has already been recorded in the history of intelligence in the entire world, let alone our country. Also, she's already a legend in the world of international hackers. Hu Xiao, if Nianji was part of our system, she could replace you as the head of the Special Operations Forces with just this achievement alone. The military was a department that rewarded people based on their achievements, and the Special Operations Forces was even more so. Here, as long as you had achievements, it didn't matter how others slandered you. Similarly, you could suck up and use connections to get into a certain position, but you also had to have the ability to produce the corresponding achievements. If you couldn't do it, you would still be kicked out. Although this was a department that couldn't completely break away from reality, it used absolute ruthless competition to ensure its strength. Only by doing so could it ensure that the country's important weapons would always be in the hands of the elites, and in the hands of the most suitable people. Yin Shixiang skimmed through the information Zhao Liangzi had found and couldn't help wiping a cold sweat. He mumbled, "Pink Piggy? Her code name is Pink Piggy? Are you sure this Pink Piggy is Nianji?" "It's definitely her." Zhao Liangzi closed his eyes. His eyes were red. Every programmer has their own style. These codes and algorithms can't be done by anyone but her. It's just that her environment was definitely not good, so the program was written in a hurry and was rather crude. But as long as it works, it's fine. She seized the opportunity and probably directly hacked into the German Federal Intelligence Agency's internal network. This kind of opportunity is really too rare. Even I would have made the same choice if I encountered it, let alone her. For every person in the intelligence field, this kind of opportunity was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Yin Shixiang was already speechless as he watched. Although many of the encrypted files couldn't be cracked in a short time, there were also many unencrypted files. He randomly flipped through a few and used the translation function that came with his email to read a few sentences. He felt his blood boil. It was the fervent gaze of a jeweler who saw a peerlessly beautiful diamond being unearthed. It was the supreme enjoyment of a gluttonous diner who discovered a peerless delicacy in a small village shop. It was also the top-secret information that all intelligence personnel were willing to exchange for with their lives. Do you understand now? No matter who has Nianji what she did, they will not let her go. Zhao Liangzi's tears finally flowed. When he saw the video of Gu Nianji being electrocuted and heard her screams, Zhao Liangzi was very upset. His chest felt suffocated, and he wanted nothing more than to rush out and find the abuser and electrocute her to vent his anger. But when he saw this priceless information and thought of Gu Nianji's current situation, Zhao Liangzi couldn't say anything. He really cried. He cried uncontrollably. He had lived for almost 30 years and he didn't remember crying like this after he was 5. This was the pain of being completely helpless in the face of a difficult situation. He knew that no matter what he did, there was no way to turn things around. Hua Xiaoheng looked at the information Zhao Liangzi had found, and his eyes darkened. He scolded Zhao Liangzi, "What are you crying for? A man doesn't cry even if he bleeds. If you cry again, get out of here." Zhao Liangzi quickly wiped his face and denied. "I'm not crying. The tears are flowing out on their own. I can't do anything about it." In Shixiang, damn. I really didn't know little Zay was so eloquent. He even dared to talk back to Hua Xiao. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at him and surprisingly didn't continue to get angry. He then lied through his teeth, "Since you're not crying, immediately locate Nianji and order all members of the Special Operations Forces to be in position. All German field personnel to be in position. Big Xiong, where did you locate Nianji last time?" Yin Shixiang's heart skipped a beat as he remembered the two field personnel who had lost contact. Looking at Hua Xiaoheng, he said fearfully, I didn't locate Nianji, but they did. They even sent two field personnel to Berlin to look for her." The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's eyes twitched again. "Hurry up and finish what you're saying. What else is going on?" Yin Shixiang was so frightened that he couldn't even finish his sentence. He said in one breath, "They originally located Nianji, but they lost contact with the two field personnel who were sent to Berlin to look for her. They had no choice but to summon me back. But as soon as I came back, they commandeered the central control room to monitor the voting and counting of the votes. That's why I haven't entered the central control room yet." End of report. Zhao Liangzi finally turned on the GPS with a grim expression. However, he discovered that the GPS in the central control room was no longer connected to the vehicle system. He turned around and shook his head at Hua Xiaoheng. "Hua Xiao, the central control room cut off the connection to the GPS in the vehicle system. I have no choice." The deputy chief said he was afraid of leaks. Yin Shixiang quickly raised his hand to show that he really had no choice. Although he had a high military rank, he was only Hua Xiaoheng's personal secretary in terms of position. When Hua Xiaoheng wasn't around, it was easy for him to be a figurehead. That was how awkward it was to have no real power. The deputy chief? How dare he do that? Hua Xiaoheng punched the car door. Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang pretended not to see the punch that made a dent in the bulletproof steel car door. Hua Xiaoheng let out a long sigh and ordered Fan Jian, who was in the driver's seat, "Activate emergency mode. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you don't arrive at the Special Operations Forces by then, you'll be sent to the kitchen to feed the pigs." Fan Jian's entire body trembled. He quickly turned on the emergency mode and gave the order to the entire fleet. Instantly, the highway from the Imperial Capital International Airport into the city rang with the sound of an air raid siren. Several military vehicles really began to speed on the highway like a roller coaster. The rich heirs who had been racing on the highway in their sports cars all dodged to the side and watched the scene with their mouths agape. They had to admit, what Formula One? What NASCAR? In the face of these military vehicles that were truly as fast as lightning, they were all weak. Speed was the most important thing in war. Without speed, how could they talk about efficiency? Fan Jian really pulled out all the stops this time. Originally, it would have taken them another 10 minutes to arrive at the Special Operations Forces headquarters. However, under Hua Xiaoheng's pressure, Fan Jian shortened the 10 minutes that was already an extraordinary performance to 5 minutes. In the end, he managed to arrive in 21 minutes of the originally scheduled 30 minutes. Therefore, this stretch of road that would normally have taken them an hour and a half without traffic jams was completed in 21 minutes. It could be considered a record for the Special Operations Forces. When he got out of the car, Fan Jian's face was pale and his legs were trembling. However, Hua Xiaoheng had already opened the door and got out of the car. He walked directly to the central control room. As he walked, he ordered the disciplinary team to arrest everyone in the central control room responsible for monitoring the election for dereliction of duty and overstepping their authority for the next 3 days. Lock them in the detention room and have them write an explanation in a day. Repeat 3 times. This was the first watch. Today was the third watch. A reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. The second watch monthly ticket was 2,100 plus 1 in the afternoon, and the third watch at 7 in the evening. Thanks to Chidian's only reading makes people happy in life. PPL PPL, and Xia Yundong Ning for the 10,000 Chidian coins each yesterday. Moi. Chapter 696. The solitary confinement of the Special Operations Forces was a terrifying place. It was even more uncomfortable than the solitary confinement in the military. There were no tables or chairs, no beds, no windows, and no light. It was just a small square room, and after being locked in, one could only sit on the floor. Being locked in a place like this for too long was enough to cause a person's mind to collapse. Most of the time, when dealing with criminals, they didn't need to torture them. Just being locked in a solitary confinement like this would cause many people's mental defenses to collapse. Huo Xiaoheng's expression still looked very calm. As he walked, people continuously saluted him. "Hello, Chief. Chief is back. Thank you for your hard work, Chief." Huo Xiaoheng nodded and looked straight ahead as he walked into the central control room building. As soon as he stepped in, the head of the disciplinary committee, Zhou Qiyuan, surrounded the building with armed members of the disciplinary committee. This was Zhou Qiyuan's second move in the past month. The last time he led the members of the disciplinary committee was when they surrounded the Special Operations Forces hospital building. Huo Xiaoheng nodded at him and led the guards Yin Xixiang and Zhao Liangzi into the elevator. A minute later, he was already standing in front of the heavy doors of the central control room. Although the central control room building was very tall, the control room was actually 6 floors underground. The buildings here were designed to defend against nuclear weapons. In other words, even if a nuclear war broke out, the facilities here could ensure that the entire country's military communications would be unimpeded. The value of this in modern warfare was simply immeasurable. The elevator they took went down, not up. Huo Xiaoheng saw Zhou Qiyuan come out of the elevator behind them and turned to look at him with his hands behind his back. "Didn't I tell you to arrest the people who used the central control room to monitor the election and vote counting for the past 3 days? What are you doing here?" Zhou Qiyuan shook his head with a bitter smile. "Reporting to Chief, these people are still inside and haven't come out." The corners of Huo Xiaoheng's eyes twitched uncontrollably again, and his entire body emitted a murderous aura. "Still inside? How long has it been? Are they going to wipe out the central control room?" Huo Xiaoheng instantly remembered what Gu Nianji had done in the German Federal Intelligence Service. Although he still didn't know how she had done it, Huo Xiaoheng was a computer expert himself. He knew that in order to achieve what Gu Nianji had done, she had to have found a rare opportunity to directly enter the German Federal Intelligence Service's intranet. If he couldn't directly enter the intranet and could only probe the outer network, he wouldn't be able to wipe out everything. At the same time, his central control room was completely defenseless and in danger of being wiped out at any time. How important was this place? How could they let anyone in so casually? Huo Xiaoheng raised his hand. "Fine. Open the door immediately. Knock everyone out and take them away." He didn't dare to imagine what had happened here in the past few days. There were spies in the Special Operations Forces, the Army, the Cabinet, and the Senate. This Mother***Kerr was a sieve. However, those people above them were still thinking about fighting for power and profit every day. They were shameless and shameless. Huo Xiaoheng's heart was burning with anxiety. He couldn't take it anymore and kicked out without waiting for Zhou Qiyuan to open the door for him. Zhou Qiyuan had just entered the password and was about to push the door open when he didn't expect Huo Xiaoheng to already kick the door open. The heavy cowhide door swung open with a loud bang, startling the people inside. A man wearing thick glasses jumped up and was about to explode in anger when he saw Huo Xiaoheng come in. He quickly put on a smile. When did Huo Xiao come back? Huo Xiaoheng ignored him and stepped to the side. He looked at the deputy chief who was walking over quickly and said dryly, "Colonel Hu, you've been in the Special Operations Forces for so many years. Must have been hard on you. Take them away." The members of the disciplinary team that Zhou Qiyuan had brought swarmed up. It was almost one-on-one. They hit everyone inside with the butt of their guns and knocked them all out. Remember to take them away and lock them in the solitary confinement room. They can't have any contact with the outside world. When they leave the solitary confinement room to write the confession materials, they can only be given pen and paper. They can't be allowed to touch the computer. Huo Xiaoheng ordered Zhou Qiyuan coldly and called little Zay over. "Back up all the systems for these 3 days. Don't worry about it for now. Connect to the Nandu satellite system first and locate Nianji's location." To Huo Xiaoheng, rescuing Gu Nianji was the most important thing now. Everything else had to wait. Also, he didn't plan on cleaning up the mess here. He had to show the higher-ups what kind of damage their whims had caused to the country. He had to chop off a few hands that shouldn't have reached out to serve as a warning to others. Yes, Chief. Zhao Liangzi felt that Gu Nianji was definitely beyond saving. With what she had done, if she were here she would have been shot already, but he could empathize with Huo Xiaoheng's heart. Just like himself, he wouldn't just watch the person he loved die. No matter what, he would definitely fight one last time. When Zhao Liangzi started the system, the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces had already entered a wartime state. All members were in combat mode. The branches of the Special Operations Forces across the country also received orders and began to be on standby. They sorted out and investigated one by one. Hua Xiaoheng only brought his trusted technical analysts to stay in the central control room and wait for Zhao Liangzi's location results. This result would determine what he would do next. He refused to believe what Zhao Liangzi said. Even though he knew what he said was correct according to common sense, he refused to believe it. He would rather believe that Gu Nianji, who had broken through all obstacles to escape when she was 12 years old, who had grown up with him for 6 years, and who had been carefully trained by him, wouldn't die without a sound. Even if she was going to die, she would die with a bang because she and he were the same kind of people in this aspect. Hua Xiaoheng's mind quickly thought of a way to rescue her. Should he use diplomatic means or rescue her in private? If he wanted a diplomatic solution, then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to step in and negotiate with Germany through diplomatic channels. After all, Gu Nianji was too important to the country. She had made such a contribution, so he wouldn't let her suffer in vain. He would make sure she received the corresponding status and respect. This was justice that everyone owed her. If she had already, Hua Xiaoheng closed his eyes and didn't want to continue thinking about it. If she had already met with misfortune, he didn't know how to calm his emotions. It was like a ferocious beast roaring in his heart and constantly wanting to escape from its cage. Hua Xiaoheng crossed his arms and slowly walked behind Zhao Liangzi. He suddenly saw the global coordinates on the big screen in front of him and froze. This isn't Berlin, Germany. He remembered Yin Shixiang reporting to him that the Special Operations Forces had first located Gu Nianji in Berlin, Germany. Zhao Liangzi also widened his eyes and said excitedly, "No, it really isn't. Nianji is on the plane. The plane has already left Germany." Yin Shixiang also rushed over and patted Zhao Liangzi's shoulder. He said excitedly, "It must be He Zhichu. He Zhichu must have rescued her. Locate the plane. Let me see." Hua Xiaoheng felt a bit conflicted when he heard that He Zhichu might have rescued Gu Nianji. Of course he was grateful to He Zhichu. At this time, no matter who saved Nianji, he would sincerely thank them. Zhao Liangzi turned on the satellite positioning system and could clearly see the specific image of the ground coordinates. The plane was high up in the sky, so it was even easier to see it clearly. Soon, a scene of clouds rolling high up in the sky appeared on the big screen. The sky was so blue that one couldn't see the end, and between the blue sky and white clouds, a streamlined plane was flying at high speed. There was a capital He on the side of the plane, indicating that it was the He family's plane. Nianji is on the plane. You're already over the Netherlands in the blink of an eye. Reinitz's voice was slow and deep, and there was a metallic clang in his voice. It sounded very decisive and not as gentle as before. This is the second monthly vote of 2100 plus 1. Thank you all for yesterday's monthly votes. A reminder for everyone's recommendation votes. Third night, 7 p.m. P.S. If the monthly votes reach 2400 today, my fourth night will be given to you tonight. If not, I'll watch the third night tomorrow. It's all the same. Everyone is anxious. Moi. Chapter 697. Haha, I'm just going home. I can't wait to go home. Is there a problem? He Zhichu's Hanover German was slightly reserved and arrogant, comparable to Reinitz's. Yeah, it's good that you're home. Reinitz was silent for a while before asking, "Is she okay?" He Zhichu paused and looked in the direction of Gu Nianji's cabin. She's fine. She just woke up for a while then went back to sleep. He still owed Reinitz a favor for this matter. If Reinitz went against him and risked his life, He Zhichu would be in a lot of trouble. It wasn't that he couldn't save Gu Nianji, but if he killed so many people in Germany, especially German intelligence agents, the enemy would be furious and use more force to pursue them. He Zhichu didn't want Gu Nianji to be chased by German soldiers with him. He wanted her to be healthy and happy among the people, and he definitely didn't want her to become a wanted criminal. That's good. Reinitz sighed deeply. Let her rest. This was recorded at my house. I think you'll need it. With that, Reinitz hung up and sent He Zhichu an audio recording. He Zhichu opened it and heard Gu Nianji crying in his arms. I'm a little beggar who was picked up. I shouldn't have wishful thinking. I don't deserve to be with him. I reap what I sow. I deserve it. I deserve it. I deserve it. He couldn't listen anymore and pressed the stop button. He put one hand on his forehead and leaned against the armchair. His expression was cold, like he was making a difficult decision. At that moment, the flight attendant knocked on the door and said with surprise, "Mr. He, there's a Mr. Huo Xiaoheng on the plane's intercom. He wants to speak to you." More accurately, it was the intercom used by the plane to connect to the ground control tower. It was usually used by pilots. He Zichu frowned. Ask him what he wants. He didn't want to talk to Huo Xiaoheng, not at all. He had no choice in the past, but now he didn't care. He had to take Nianji home. The flight attendant quickly said, "The pilot asked, and Mr. Huo said he wanted to ask if Miss Gu Nianji was on our plane. He also asked when we would arrive at their airport and that he would come pick you and Miss Gu up." He Zichu shook his head in amusement. "How did you answer?" "We answered according to the route you instructed us to, right?" The pilot said that Miss Gu was on the plane, but she was unconscious. "Also, we're going to the United States. We won't be going to their airport." The flight attendant was very clear. She had indeed answered according to the route He Zichu had instructed. He Zichu wasn't surprised that Huo Xiaoheng could communicate with his plane, but he was more surprised that Huo Xiaoheng had found him so quickly. When Yin Shixiang had contacted him 3 days ago, he had said that Huo Xiaoheng didn't know about this. He Zichu sneered inwardly. As the head of the special forces, he couldn't even protect a woman. How could he still have the face to talk to him? "Well, you said it very well. You can hang up now." He Zichu waved his hand and asked the flight attendant to leave. Walking out of the cabin that served as a study, He Zichu looked at Gu Nianji and saw that she was still sleeping with her eyes closed, so he went to another cabin to prepare for his return. Although Gu Nianji's eyes were closed, she couldn't fall asleep for a long time. It was like a hole had been drilled in her heart, and all her emotions had flowed out from this hole. But she didn't feel sad at all. She only felt relaxed like never before. It turned out that letting go wasn't as difficult as she thought it would be. But it was too easy and her heart was empty. Without faith, what could she use to fill the empty space in her heart? It was better to enrich herself first. When she returned, she would study hard and graduate early. Then she would find a job and live a quiet and carefree life. She would stay away from the social class that didn't belong to her. Gu Nianji closed her eyes and slowly counted sheep in her mind. She actually fell asleep again. Huo Xiaoheng's expression was serious. Both his hands were placed in front of the console in the central control room of the Special Forces headquarters. In front of him was a high-quality microphone. He waited for a few minutes, but He Zichu still refused to talk to him. Zhao Liangzi stared at the flight path of the plane and said nervously, "Huo Xiao, that plane is already flying towards the English Channel." He had already confirmed from the pilot that He Zichu was taking Gu Nianji to the United States. Huo Xiaoheng looked at the console expressionlessly for a while and tilted his head at Zhao Liangzi. "Go over there and be my assistant." Zhao Liangzi quickly gave up his seat and sat on the other side of the console. "Huo Xiao, what do you want me to do?" "Hack into He Zichu's plane and change their flight path. Before they realize it, the plane must fly to our country's air defense identification zone." As Huo Xiaoheng spoke, he was already focused on turning on the supercomputer. He logged into his account and began to look for He Zichu's plane's communication channel with the ground and satellite. As long as he found the channel, there was a chance to hack in. After all, He Zichu's plane wasn't a heavily guarded military plane. Perhaps he didn't expect Huo Xiaoheng to do such a thing, so it only took Huo Xiaoheng and Zhao Liangzi less than 5 minutes to find He Zichu's private plane's communication channel with the ground control console. Huo Xiaoheng was the lead and Zhao Liangzi was the assistant. The two of them quickly cracked the onboard password and entered He Zichu's private plane's control console system. The more automated something was, the easier it was to control it remotely. Planes nowadays were already very automated, so the pilot didn't need to do much. They only needed to input the flight path in advance and continuously exchange signals with the ground control console along the way. It was basically no more difficult than driving. After another 5 minutes, Huo Xiaoheng had already secretly changed He Zichu's flight path system. The plane just happened to fly over the English Channel. The blue sky and blue coastline reflected each other, and even the pilot was confused. The plane quietly made a turn here and flew in the direction of the Huaxia Empire. The pilot adjusted the autopilot control button and only paid attention to exchanging signals with the ground control console. Huo Xiaoheng also helped them clear the obstacles and informed the ground control console in advance that the plane was the Huaxia Empire's private plane and needed this route. He asked them to provide convenience along the way. It wasn't easy to suddenly change the flight path. Only Huo Xiaoheng, with the power of the entire country, could easily change the other party's flight path without being noticed. They nervously stared at Hijichu's plane and waited for another 2 hours until they confirmed that the plane had already flown over the Ukraine. They finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, Hua Xiaoheng was still a bit worried. He ordered Yin Shixiang, "Go to the Air Force and watch them fill up their best fighter jets. Be prepared for battle." This time, no matter what, he had to make sure Gunyanji safely returned to the Huaxia Empire. Only here could she truly be protected. Hijichu returned to Gunyanji's cabin to read for a while and also felt sleepy. Seeing her sleeping soundly, he was affected and also slept on the other bed next to her. The lights on the plane were off. Other than the pilot and co-pilot, even the flight attendants were asleep. After half an hour, the pilot and co-pilot discussed for a while. Seeing that there were no problems and the airflow was stable, they decided to take turns to sleep. The flight was 10 hours long, and they hadn't had a good rest in the past few days. They could take the opportunity to sleep for a while. After they each slept for 3 hours, they found that they weren't facing the blue coast of the Atlantic Ocean, but the dense city lights. The two of them were speechless. Where is this? Have we arrived in America? It doesn't look like it. The two of them asked and answered their own questions. They looked at each other and saw the fear on each other's faces. What's going on? They panicked and checked the flight data records of the plane. Soon, the two of them exclaimed, "This isn't the route we set to America. Where are we going?" The two of them studied it for a while before confirming the end of the route. It was the T3 terminal of the Huaxia Imperial Capital International Airport. Oh no, did we enter the wrong route? The pilot's face turned pale. After all, He was going back to the Huaxia Empire in the first place. Yes, I remember that too. I changed my mind later. The two of them were still dizzy. They dawdled for a while before asking the co-pilot to knock on the door of the cabin where Hijichu and Gunyanji were. Hijichu was awakened by the knocking on the door. He rubbed his eyes and got up. He opened the window cover to look outside. He could only see dense, bright lights below. The sky was already dark, so he couldn't see where it was. He got up and opened the door. Seeing that it was the co-pilot, he nodded. "Are we almost there?" The co-pilot's face was flushed red as he muttered, "Mr. He? We might have gotten the wrong route." Hijichu. It was the third watch. "Thank you for your monthly votes yesterday. Good night, dear ones. If there was a monthly vote increase of 2,400 today, it would be very late. Dear ones could see the same tomorrow morning. If the monthly vote was less than 2,400, dear ones would also be anxious. It would arrive tomorrow anyway and continue to the third watch. Oh, intersection. Oh. Chapter 698. What do you mean we took the wrong route? We've been flying for 8 hours now, and you're telling me we took the wrong route? Hijichu was furious. Glaring at the co-pilot, Hijichu's eyes were about to spit fire. The co-pilot almost cried. We don't know what's going on. Everything is normal. If we really took the wrong route, the control tower on the ground would have warned us, but they didn't. We communicated with them the entire way and everything was normal. The control towers on the ground all used radars to track incoming aircraft. Normally, they took the route that had been reported in advance. If it wasn't reported in advance, it would be treated as an emergency warning aircraft. In serious cases, it would be treated as an invasion of airspace and immediately destroyed. Many years ago, a South Korean civilian aircraft deviated from its original route by more than 600 kilometers and flew into the airspace of the former Soviet Union. It didn't respond properly after being warned, and was later destroyed by 2 air-to-air missiles from the former Soviet Union. More than 200 people on board were killed. However, Hijichu's private plane had reported to the control tower on the ground normally the entire way. The other side didn't think they were an invasion, which meant they must have reported the route in advance. However, they didn't know why the route wasn't to the United States, but instead changed 180 degrees to the Huaxia Empire. Hijichu went to the cockpit and looked at the pilot's control panel and instrument panel. His expression became even colder. If he guessed correctly, this was probably Hua Xiaoheng's doing. They hacked into his private plane's operating system and remotely changed the route. They also notified the control tower on the ground beforehand, so they were able to fly here without any hindrance. They were already over Kazakhstan and would soon enter the Huaxia Empire's aviation zone. Hijichu glared at the two pilots. "What were you doing just now? Sleeping? Why did you only realize now?" The two pilots touched their noses and lowered their heads in embarrassment. They were indeed sleeping. Although one was sleeping and the other was on duty, The one who wasn't sleeping didn't think there would be a problem with the route. This was a problem that occurred when one relied too much on computers and machines. Ijichu turned around and looked coldly at the data on the dashboard. He quickly made a decision. Contact Mongolia immediately. We'll change to Mongolia and refuel there. Then we'll fly directly to the United States from the Bering Strait. The two pilots nodded hurriedly and started to contact the Mongolians and Russians. These were all routes that they wanted to change. Hua Xiaoheng and his men waited in the central control room for another 6 hours before Hijichu's private plane finally arrived above Kazakhstan. It would soon enter the Wuxia Empire's aviation zone. At this moment, the warning signal that he had set for the flight route started beeping. Zhao Liangzi quickly typed out the data analysis and looked up in surprise. Huaxiao, they seem to have discovered that their flight route has changed. They're not continuing to fly in our direction. They're diverting to Mongolia. This was to travel from Mongolia to Russia, then cross the Bering Strait and enter the United States. Hua Xiaoheng knew that there was no other way. In fact, the other party's reaction was much better than he had expected. After all, they had already flown all the way to the Wuxia Empire's aviation zone before they realized that there was an error in the flight path. If he had discovered it earlier, he would have had to pay an even greater price. He stood up and took the communicator to Yin Shixiang, who had already gone to the Air Force to wait for orders. Prepare 6 fighter jets. I want the latest supersonic fighter jets. Have the Air Force send 4 pilots, including you and me. We'll take off immediately. Little Zay will be in charge of ground control. With that, he strode out. Outside the central control room, everyone was on standby. They knew that something big had happened. Hua Xiaoheng did not answer any calls or see anyone for the past 8 hours. General Ji had called him several times from the Senate, but was told that something big had happened in the Special Operations Forces and that Hua Xiaoheng could not answer the phone. Later, the newly appointed Prime Minister, Tan Dongbang's first televised speech had to be carried out without Hua Xiaoheng. The empty seat next to the Prime Minister's daughter, Tan Guorin, received a lot of attention that night. On social media, everyone was gossiping about who the seat was reserved for. Hua Xiaoheng couldn't care less. He sped the entire way and had Fan Jian drive fast. He also used emergency mode and arrived at the Air Force base without any obstructions. He had a high military rank and used to be a fighter pilot. He was in charge of experimental piloting of new types of aircraft and had a very good relationship with the Air Force. Hua Xiaoheng felt like he had returned to his hometown when he arrived. All his orders would be carried out immediately. However, the Supreme Military Council still found out that he wanted to mobilize 6 fighter jets at once and fly with bombs attached. The old men were extremely shocked. They knocked on the table and asked General Ji, "What is Hua Xiaoheng trying to do? Is he trying to rebel?" General Ji didn't know what had happened to Hua Xiaoheng, but he knew that Hua Xiaoheng was not someone who acted recklessly. Every move he made had a plan and a purpose. He had always thought about the interests of the nation and the military. "Don't worry, I'll have Guanchen go take a look." General Ji understood that it was impossible to make a phone call now. They had to go to the Air Force base to wait for him. Hua Guanchen was also a member of the Supreme Military Council and was very displeased with his son's arrogance. However, when Hua Guanchen arrived at the Air Force base in the suburbs of the imperial capital, Hua Xiaoheng had already changed into a fighter pilot's uniform and helmet and was walking towards the latest supersonic Harrier. "Xiaoheng, stop right there. What are you doing?" Hua Guanchen hurriedly got out of the car and called out to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng did not stop and replied without looking back, "I have a mission. Please wait a moment, General Hua. I'll report to you after I complete it." You unfilial son. How can you speak to me like this? Fine, I order you to stop all operations immediately. Obey the orders of the organization. Hua Guanchen was furious. Hua Xiaoheng had ignored him in front of so many people. Whether as a father or a superior, Hua Guanchen's dignity had been deeply wounded. Hua Xiaoheng stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Hua Guanchen. He said calmly, "I don't accept random orders and I don't obey evil laws. Please don't stop me from carrying out my duties as usual. If there is a delay and the nation's interests are greatly damaged, will General Hua bear the full responsibility? Or will you share the responsibility with your military council?" Hua Guanchen froze. Hua Xiaoheng did not seem to be angry, nor did he seem to be joking. What was he trying to do? "I'm sorry, this is top secret and cannot be disclosed to unrelated people," Hua Xiaoheng said coldly as he boarded the fighter jet. The cockpit of the fighter jet slowly closed and the lights in the nose flickered a few times. Soon everything was ready. The 6 fighter jets whizzed out of the runway and quickly rose into the air, flying northwest. The Wuxia Empire's latest 6 fighter jets had just flown out of the Wuxia Empire's airspace when they were discovered by the American and European satellite systems monitoring the area. The world's major media outlets were in an uproar when they received the news. Even the Wuxia Empire's own media outlets were discussing the new Prime Minister's first televised speech and the goddess-like demeanor of the Prime Minister's daughter. Countless people were sharing the same headline. #6 latest fighter jets flying out in formation. I'm also speechless. Was there going to be a war? However, there were also knowledgeable people who said that the 6 fighter jets' flight mode was to welcome guests. In other words, they were using the highest specifications of the nation's air force and the highest standards of etiquette to welcome guests. What kind of god would need such a high-standard welcome mode? The President of the United Nations? Or the Secretary General of the United Nations? It seemed like none of them. Because their specifications were to be escorted by 4 fighter jets, not 6. So who could it be? Could it be someone even more powerful than the President of the United Nations or the President of the United Nations? Just as everyone was in an uproar and the world's media were paying attention to the grand occasion of the Wuxia Empire's 6 fighter jets welcoming guests, Hijichu discovered that their private plane had been blocked from all directions by the 6 fighter jets. Hua Xiaoheng's voice sounded from the intercom again. Mr. He, please fly according to the established flight route. I will welcome you at the Imperial Capital Airport. Get lost. Hijichu was finally angry. Hua Xiaoheng. You're too despicable. Despicable? Mr. He, you're exaggerating. I'm only thanking you for saving me. Also, Nianji was on your plane and caused you a lot of trouble. I sincerely thank you. In the future, if you have any requests, as long as it doesn't violate moral principles or our nation's interests, I will comply. Hijichu was so angry at Hua Xiaoheng's high-sounding words that he laughed. Major General Hua, you have quite a glib tongue. Unfortunately, it's too late. Accept your fate. If it weren't for me, Nianji would have already been killed by the Gestapo. What's the point of your belated comments? Hua Xiaoheng was silent for a while, then quickly perked up and said calmly, Mr. He already lost Nianji once back then and almost caused her to lose her life. Being able to save Nianji this time can be considered atonement. I thank you on her behalf. Hijichu. He was practically furious. As a great lawyer, he was actually rendered speechless by Hua Xiaoheng's words. In his anger, he recalled the video of Gu Nianji crying in pain that Reinitz had sent him. He wanted Hua Xiaoheng to back off, so he didn't hesitate to take out his phone to find the audio and play it into the intercom. Hua Xiaoheng, you still have the face to mention Nianji to me? Listen to it yourself. Gu Nianji's painful cries instantly sounded in Hua Xiaoheng's headset. Professor He, I'm so sad. I'm really so sad. It's even worse than when they beat me or electrocuted me. I'm being tortured here and he's beside another woman. He even helps her sprain her ankle. I can't take it. I really can't take it. I know it's not his fault. I know he definitely doesn't know what happened to me, but I still feel bad. I still blame him. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm not that great. I'm selfish. I'm petty. I don't care about the big picture. I don't care about the big picture. I don't have a father or a mother. I'm not a fair, rich, and beautiful girl. I'm just a little beggar who was picked up. I shouldn't have wishful thinking. I don't deserve to be with him. I reap what I sow. I deserve it. I deserve it. I deserve it. This is the 4th monthly vote of 2,400 plus updates. Thank you, dear friends, for your monthly votes and recommendation votes. I didn't expect the monthly votes to be so powerful. Fortunately, it's a weekend, so I can wake up at 7 in the morning to write. Today's monthly votes plus updates will be sent to you. Good night, dear friends. It's going to be Monday soon. Dear friends, I forgot about the recommendation votes. Chapter 699. Gu Nianji's voice was hoarse from crying, and it sounded like a completely different person from her usual sweet and tender voice. But he clearly knew that it was Nianji's voice. He originally thought that she was in extreme pain when he saw the video of her being electrocuted, but hearing her cry, he realized that there was something even more painful than that. I was wrong. I deserve it. These 2 sentences hit Hua Xiaoheng like a nuclear bomb, and he was instantly crushed into pieces without any effort. For a moment, Hua Xiaoheng's mind was in a state of almost unconscious blankness. He no longer saw the dark blue night sky before him, nor did he see the twinkling stars close at hand. There was no private plane in front of him that he had been so worried about. He only felt that he was in a boundless wilderness, where the world was long and the years had passed. He was like a traveler who had traveled thousands of miles in the desert. All his food had been eaten, and all his drinking water had been used up. But when he saw the oasis in front of him and thought that he had been saved from death, he suddenly collapsed. He heard her voice in the air and echoed in the wilderness. The wind lingered in all directions and the rain was bleak. Every word came from the depths of her heart, entered his ears and entered his heart. She exposed the deepest part of herself and he could see her pain. It was the kind of pain that she couldn't let go, but she had no choice but to let go. The expression on his face didn't change, and his hands were still firmly gripping the plane's rudder. He looked straight ahead and didn't seem to be moved at all. But the shock of that moment was indescribable. It could only be described as empathy. He was in as much pain as she was in, and the pain was doubled. But he was a man who believed in bleeding but not crying. No matter how serious the injury, no matter how painful the pain, he would only smile and swallow it. Even if he was really blown to smithereens by a nuclear bomb, he would still return to protect the country in his heart. At that moment he would rather turn into a gust of wind. Every time she felt the breath of the wind, it meant that he had returned to see her. But the woman he couldn't let go of, the woman whose name was engraved in every crevice in his heart, the woman he loved more than his life, was covered in wounds because of him. He didn't know that Nianji was in Germany and was imprisoned, but she had also seen him and Tanguerin get off the plane. When she was at her weakest, when she needed help the most, and when she longed for him the most, he used his carelessness to give her a fatal blow. The corners of Huo Xiaoheng's lips slowly curled into a faint smile. In his more than 10 years of military career, he had been tortured, shot, and fought against all kinds of outlaws like a savage in the rubber forests of Southeast Asia. He had a large area of skin grafting on his back, and the gunshot wound on his shoulder had almost pierced through his entire body. Fortunately, he was lucky that the bullet did not hit his shoulder blade, otherwise he would have been disabled. But all the suffering added up together was not as devastating as Nianji's 2 sentences. Those sufferings only hurt his body, but her pain directly hit his soul. He already knew that being with her would be a huge gamble. Since she had already placed her bet, he could only accompany her to the end. He had squandered all his emotions on her, and when she no longer wanted him, he would have nothing and be completely broke. The girl who was 7 days away from turning 19, the girl who had been with him from the age of 12 to 18, had used this kind of determination to carve it into his heart. Those people were really scheming. They finally knew his weakness, so they raised their knives and ruthlessly stabbed the softest and most fatal part of him. But if they thought they could completely defeat him like this, they were gravely mistaken. Huo Xiaoheng held his breath and stared straight ahead. He was dazed for a moment, then said with focus, "Nianji was in so much pain, but you still recorded it. Yijichu, I really overestimated you. Don't you think it's despicable to tear open someone's scars and show them to others? Nianji trusted you so much that she told you what was in her heart. Is this how you treat her trust?" Yijichu actually regretted it as soon as he played the audio. He knew Reinitz had bad intentions when he sent the audio to him. It was recorded at Reinitz's home. Reinitz's home wasn't his real home at all, but a secret stronghold of the German Federal Intelligence Service. So it wasn't strange at all that there were all kinds of secretly recording devices. He clearly knew Reinitz's intentions, and he had no intention of showing it to anyone. However, when Huo Xiaoheng relentlessly chased after him, he lost his head in anger and played it to him without hesitation. Now that Huo Xiaoheng had hit on his guilt again, Yijichu clenched his fists and refused to back down. "If others say that about me, I'll admit it. It's despicable and I betrayed her trust. But only you can't, because you're the one who should hear it the most. What's wrong? Are you angry? Can't you get as far away from her as possible? Don't let her see you again." Huo Xiaoheng relaxed and said calmly, "It's not up to you to decide whether she wants to see me or not. You have to let Nianji decide for herself. Similarly, did you get her permission to take her to the United States? She was injured so badly by the Gestapo and is still in a coma. You still want me to ask her?" Of course, Yijichu wouldn't let Gu Nianji talk to Huo Xiaoheng. What was there to say? She had given up, and no matter how glib she was, it wouldn't change the truth. Huo Xiaoheng had already expected Gu Nianji to be injured, so he said calmly, "It's precisely because she's injured that you should hand her over to me. Only I can take care of her more safely." Yijichu understood Huo Xiaoheng's hidden meaning. Yijichu knew Gu Nianji's special constitution better than anyone, even Huo Xiaoheng. This was also why he had been hesitant to take her back immediately. He still didn't have complete control over his hometown, and he hadn't caught the mastermind yet. He was afraid that if Nianji went back with him, the tragedy from back then would repeat itself. But this time he realized that his worries were unnecessary. As long as she was by his side, no one would dare take her away. These few times, those people had wanted to harm Nianji, but they had secretly transferred him away before they dared to make a move. What did this mean? It meant that they were afraid of him, so afraid that they didn't dare to play tricks in front of him. So as long as Nianji was always by his side and didn't leave his sight, she would always be safe. And he could also act without worry and eliminate all the hidden dangers one by one. She only ended up like this because you took care of her. Are you sure? It was because I wasn't by her side that she was in danger. Ijichu, do you know that it's better to teach a man to fish than to give him a fish? You have to protect her, not put her under your nose and watch her every night. Without freedom, how are you different from those people who want to imprison her? Huo Xiaoheng patiently reasoned with Ijichu. He didn't want to anger him, and Nianji was still in his hands. I imprison her. Ijichu couldn't take it anymore. If it was in the past, I would still be grateful to you for saving her and taking care of her. But now, look at how much suffering she has suffered because of you. Huo Xiaoheng saw that Ijichu wouldn't listen to any advice, and he had already detected that there were more and more fighter jets spying on them around them. They couldn't waste any more time here. Ijichu, think about it carefully. She was unscathed for 6 years with me, but ever since you came to her side, she's had bad luck. Do you really think she's in trouble because of me? Huo Xiaoheng finally stopped being polite. At the same time, he flipped his wrist, and the fighter he was piloting suddenly turned 90 degrees. The fire control radar quickly activated and locked onto a foreign fighter jet in their 9 o'clock direction. Bang! A series of interference missiles suddenly fired from the direction locked on by the fire control radar of Huo Xiaoheng's fighter jet. It emitted threatening smoke in the night sky, and then very quickly, a fighter jet with a plaster flag appeared and quickly left the 9 o'clock direction. See, there's more than our fighter jet here. Huo Xiaoheng reminded Ijichu, don't hesitate anymore. At least wait until Nianji recovers before making a decision. What do you mean? Ijichu was a bit anxious. He had also seen Huo Xiaoheng drive away the Japanese fighter jet with the plaster flag. Can you guarantee it? You can record my words now. If I go back on my word, you can play it for anyone to hear, including Nianji or even my boss, my colleagues, or my subordinates. You can make me lose all my dignity. Ijichu's expression darkened. Fine, that's what you said. Repeat what you just said and I'll record it. He turned on the recording button on his phone. Huo Xiaoheng said clearly, I, Huo Xiaoheng, agree to wait for Gu Nianji to make a decision after she wakes up. Whether she stays in our country or goes to another country, it's all up to her. Ijichu recorded it and replayed it for Huo Xiaoheng. You heard that? If you don't let her go, I have other ways besides this. I believe you. Huo Xiaoheng didn't care. With lawyer He's methods, if you really want to mess with me, you naturally have a way. It's good that you know. Ijichu left the cockpit and went to Gu Nianji's cabin. Gu Nianji was still unconscious. Ijichu was startled to see her cheeks flushed red and her face like a peach blossom. He reached out to touch her forehead and found it was boiling hot. She had a fever? Ijichu composed himself and called her softly. Nianji? Nianji? How do you feel? Gu Nianji also knew she had a fever. Her entire body was burning, her lips were chapped, and her throat was burning. She answered softly with a raspy voice and opened her eyes to look at Ijichu weakly. Ijichu patted her head and asked quietly, Nianji, are you willing to go home with me? Gu Nianji's eyes were slightly closed as she stuttered. Professor He, aren't we going home? Ijichu hesitated before asking tentatively, yes, come back with me to the United States. Do you want to go? Why go to the United States? Gu Nianji frowned. The United States isn't my home. My home is in the Wuxia Empire. I want to go back to the Wuxia Empire. You still want to go back to the Wuxia Empire? I thought you already cut ties with Huo Xiaoheng. You still can't leave him? Ijichu's smile was a bit bleak and disheveled. No wonder Huo Xiaoheng always had the upper hand in front of him. He was so sure, she loved him so he would always be invincible. And this position was originally his. What right did Huo Xiaoheng have to take it away? Although Gu Nianji had a high fever, she wasn't confused. She shook her head slightly. Although her voice was hoarse, her words were clear. No, I want to go back to the Wuxia Empire because my home is there. My studies, career and friends are all there. As for Huo Xiao, I have nothing to do with him anymore. She no longer felt anything special when she mentioned this name. Nothing to do with him anymore? What if he insists? He Jichu was obviously worried. He didn't believe Hua Xiaoheng would let go. Gun Yanji was silent. No, he's not that kind of person. If she insisted on breaking up, Hua Xiaoheng wouldn't pester her. She had been with him for so long. From an ignorant 12-year-old to a young girl who had her first awakening of love, she had used all her wisdom to figure out the seemingly unreachable and taciturn iron-blooded man. Although she had lost completely in the end, she didn't regret it. If she hadn't loved deeply, how would she know what she really wanted? This was the first watch. There were a total of 4 watches yesterday. The last watch was at 11 o'clock p.m. Last night? Dear friends, you forgot to check your watches. Today is Monday. Remind everyone to vote. The second watch was at 7 o'clock p.m. Thanks to Molly0707, PPL, and Crazy in Love with Little Rock from Chidian for the 10,000 Chidian coins each yesterday. Moi. Chapter 700. Hijichu quietly left Gun Yanji's cabin and went to the cockpit. He spoke to Hua Xiaoheng over the comms. Yanji has a fever. You have to hurry. Hua Xiaoheng nodded immediately. Roger. Prepare to return to the original route. We'll escort you. Hijichu looked at the 2 pilots. Follow the original route to the Huaxia Empire. The 2 pilots quickly changed the route and confirmed the ground navigation points. They were extremely busy. Hua Xiaoheng turned on the comms with the base. Little Zhe let Zhou Qiyuan in. Zhou Qiyuan was the head of the Special Forces disciplinary team and also one of Hua Xiaoheng's 2 other secret personal secretaries. Zhou Qiyuan was waiting outside the door and immediately came in when summoned. Hua Xiaoheng personally told him, get Chen Lai out and have him prepare an ambulance to the Air Force Base. Just say Miss Gu has a fever and he knows what to do. Zhou Qiyuan had obeyed Hua Xiaoheng's orders last time and arrested all the medical staff in the headquarters hospital building in the name of the disciplinary team. They were still locked up in the disciplinary team's temporary detention center. Zhou Qiyuan had already completed the first round of interrogation and found a few problematic people. Although the rest hadn't been released, they were treated much better. Chen Lai's situation was more special. Zhou Qiyuan was suspicious of him, but Hua Xiaoheng clearly trusted him. Hua Xiao. Zhou Qiyuan hesitated. Hua Xiaoheng immediately became angry. Go now. Roger, Chief. Zhou Qiyuan didn't dare say anything else and immediately saluted the microphone. The sky was already completely dark. When the Huaxia Empire's 6 newest fighter jets escorted a large passenger plane to the Imperial Capital International Airport's T3 terminal, the entire world was amazed and guessed what kind of person the Huaxia Empire would welcome with the highest standards. The relevant agencies quickly found out who the passenger plane belonged to, but when the cabin door opened, the Huaxia Empire's Deputy Secretary General of the Supreme Military Council, Major General Hua Xiaoheng, walked out. He didn't walk out alone. In his arms was a person covered tightly with a thin blanket as he walked out of the plane's suspension ladder. As soon as they got off the plane, an ambulance arrived. Hua Xiaoheng directly carried the person into the ambulance. Who was this person? Almost instantly, photos of Hua Xiaoheng wearing sunglasses and a major general's uniform, carefully carrying a person off the plane went viral. Previously, there had been people who had intentionally or unintentionally started the conversation and wanted to send Hua Xiaoheng and Tang Guiren into the same pile. However, the moment this photo was released, the fake reviewers were too embarrassed to come out and continue with the matchmaking. This was because the woman was actually at a disadvantage when it came to matchmaking. Gun Yanji was lifted onto a mobile operating table and sent to Chen Lai's operating room with the help of several medical staff. Gun Yanji actually didn't need surgery, but she needed a thorough physical examination. Hua Xiaoheng wanted to know if she had been mistreated in any other way. Hijichu didn't follow him in. Instead, he put his hands in his trouser pockets and stood in the hallway outside the operating room. He looked out the window and had a panoramic view of the Special Operations Forces headquarters base. Hua Xiaoheng followed Chen Lai inside and watched as he performed various tests on Gun Yanji. Chen Lai waited until the CT data came out before saying to Hua Xiaoheng with a straight face, "She's fine, but she went through another round of torture. Just like the cat that was repeatedly thrown downstairs, it was thrown down again." As he spoke, he looked at Hua Xiaoheng with a mocking expression. "Tell me who threw her this time?" Hua Xiaoheng sighed. "Are you sure she's fine? We'll find out tomorrow. It's not the first time." Chen Lai's smile became even more mocking. Aren't you guarding against me? You even let me participate in such an important examination? You know I can leak secrets at any time. I'm telling you, Hua Xiaoheng, or you can just kill me. That way, everything will be over and no one will leak your precious little secret. Hua Xiaoheng knew that Qinlai was venting his anger at being locked up for so many days for no reason. He glanced at him and asked, "How is Nianji's current condition?" "She's already running a high fever. She should be unconscious by now." "Don't worry, it's not the first time. I have all the data to check." Qinlai pouted. "If it wasn't for Nianji, do you think I would still care about you?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded. "Fine, looks like you're determined to cause trouble today. Let's go to your office first. I'll talk to you later." "You said it yourself. You kept my people locked up all this time. I haven't even settled the score with you yet." Qinlai angrily threw the documents in his hands on the table and turned to enter his office. Hua Xiaoheng walked out of the operating room. He Zichu, who was waiting outside, said calmly, "Nianji is running a high fever. Other than that, there are no other problems." He Zichu let out a long sigh and looked at his watch. "Fine, I'll go now. I'll call her when her fever subsides." Hua Xiaoheng nodded. "I'll have Big Xiong walk you out." Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi admired He Zichu very much. Hua Xiaoheng would be more at ease with them seeing him out. He Zichu didn't comment. He glanced at the half-open operating room door and seemed to see Gu Nianji lying calmly in the middle of a pile of equipment. He looked at Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng bowed slightly. "Don't worry, all the data here will be destroyed. I'll personally see it destroyed." He Zichu nodded slightly. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to. Gu Nianji had been with Hua Xiaoheng for so many years and no one knew about her special constitution. It was enough to prove that Hua Xiaoheng was very careful in this area. "It's good that you know. This is the last time I'll back down. If you let anyone else know about this final secret, no matter what you say, I'll definitely take her away." He Zichu didn't mince words. His tone was much more imposing than before. Hua Xiaoheng raised a brow. "I'll say it again. If you take her away, can you guarantee her safety? Can you prevent others from coveting her?" Haha. He Zichu only laughed and didn't say anything else. How did Hua Xiaoheng know? Haha. After He Zichu left, Hua Xiaoheng went to Qinlai's office. Qinlai was holding a rag and a bucket as he cleaned the office. He never let anyone enter his place. In the past, it was always Yi Zitan who helped him clean. Now that Yi Zitan and he were both locked up, everything here was covered in dust. Hua Xiaoheng didn't help him clean. Instead, he stood silently to the side and took out a cigarette. He walked to the window, opened it and lit it up to take a drag. Qinlai smelled the smoke and walked over with a sour expression to chase him away. Go. Don't smoke in my place. This is a non-smoking area. Understand?" Hua Xiaoheng pursed his lips and threw the cigarette into the trash can. He turned around and said, "Zhou Qiuan told you, right?" Qinlai snorted. "I, Qinlai, am upright and stable. I've never done such despicable things before. You can suspect anyone but me." Hua Xiaoheng's dark eyes darkened. Although his heart was filled with endless frustration, he still sat across from Qinlai and said to him, "Zhou Qiuan investigated you under my orders. It was also routine work." Routine work means putting someone you've been friends with for more than 10 years in detention without saying a word? Qinlai slammed the table and stood up. "Hua Xiaoheng, I'm telling you, if there's even the slightest black mark on my personal information because of this, I'll kill you. If I want to leak secrets, I can do it whenever I want. Do you have secrets in front of me?" Qinlai pointed at Hua Xiaoheng's nose and scolded him. "I treat you as a friend, but you treat me as a spy. I can't be friends anymore. I'm done with you." Hua Xiaoheng quietly listened to him vent and waited for him to finish before asking, "Are you done?" "No." Qinlai roared. "There's still Dr. Yi. I'm telling you, hurry up and let her out. Torturing her is the same as torturing me." This was the second watch. There were a total of 4 watches yesterday, and the last watch was at 11 p.m. last night. Dear friends, you forgot to look at your watches. Today is Monday, a reminder for everyone's recommendation tickets. Good night, everyone. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.